Hello, everyone. Good morning. The date is February 9th, 2023, and we are going to get started with the bill hearings in the Ways and Means Committee. I am Vice Chair Delegate Janelle Wilkins, stepping in for our chair who has a bill in Judiciary. We do have a number of bills today dealing with tax credits, and I'd like to remind everyone that we have 2 minutes per witness, except for our sponsors who are unlimited, but we just always ask them not to abuse that unlimited time. We will hear from our in-person witnesses first for each bill, and then we will go to our virtual witnesses. So now we will start with the bill hearing on HB 179. Welcome, Delegate Cardin.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair. It's a pleasure to see you and the Ways and Means Committee again. For the record, John Cardin on behalf of House Bill 179. Maryland estate tax portability permits a surviving spouse, this is already law, to claim the unused Maryland estate tax exemption of a deceased spouse. By electing portability, the surviving spouse utilizes both their own Maryland estate tax exemption as well as any unused Maryland estate tax exemption of their deceased spouse. However, differing time periods for the federal and the state election periods results in confusion. This bill creates parity between the federal government's 5-year and the Maryland's 2-year election period, thereby removing any confusion caused by the inconsistency between federal and state estate tax portability time periods. The Maryland State Bar Association brought this bill to our attention. They are here to testify on it. I'm pleased to introduce Sarah Call, testifying on behalf of the MSBA. She's the chair-elect of the State Bar Association's Estates and Trusts Section Council, and she can certainly answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Cardin and Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. Again, my name is Sarah Call. I am the chair-elect of the Estate and Trust section of the Maryland State Bar Association here in support of House Bill 179. Many people like to set up what we call sweetheart wills and leaving everything to their surviving spouses. But it used to be, of course, that was penalized for estate tax purposes because the first spouse to die would then waste exemption. Now that we have portability, then the surviving spouse does not have to be worried about wasting exemption in doing their estate plans. So portability is an important benefit for Maryland residents. Now that we've got this portability, it's easy to miss the election, though, because in order to get that benefit, you have to file an estate tax return for that purpose. And otherwise, people with sweetheart wills would not have to file that return. So because it's easy to miss, the federal government has the same concept of portability in their law. They extended the deadline first from 9 months to 2 years, and then from 2 years to 5 years. So when the first extension applied, we asked for Maryland to have that same 2-year deadline, which is now the law. And now that it has extended the deadline to 5 years, we're asking that the Maryland law simply apply the same federal deadline. Having 2 different deadlines has caused some confusion with our practitioners. We've gotten questions on the listserv as to whether Maryland does have a 5-year deadline now that the federal government has one. So for those reasons, we don't want our residents to miss this important benefit because of confusion. So we ask a favorable report for House Bill 179. Happy to answer any questions either now or in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Any questions from members? All right, seeing none, that ends the hearing on HB 179. Thank you, Delegate. Next, we're going to take up HB 180, Delegate Resnick. And I also have on this list Chris Jones and then potentially one person virtually. We'll see if they're here.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of Ways and Means. Pleasure to be before you. We are here on HB 180, which is a change to our subtraction modification for adoption expenses, a law that's been on the books for quite some time and hasn't been changed in quite some time. This bill modifies the existing law in 3 very distinct ways. First, it eliminates the distinction between an in-state resident child being adopted and an out-of-state resident child being adopted, because in my eyes, if a child's being adopted into the state of Maryland, they are going to be a Maryland resident regardless. The second is it increases the actual deductible amount to $10,000 for children without special needs and $12,000 for children with special needs. That is a doubling of the existing tax credit. And third, and finally, what I think is most important, is that it changes the nature of the deduction from costs associated with adoption to the actual act of adoption itself. This idea was originally brought to me by my constituent, Chris Jones, who's here with me today. He and his wife first fostered their daughter, Zahara, who is a child with special needs and needed my office's help to run some bureaucratic red tape for them. And they have since adopted Zahara and have made her a member of their family. And Chris came to me afterwards and said, not for his own benefit, but for future benefits, we need to change this law so that we can encourage more adoptions, especially encourage more adoptions of children with special needs in our state. You would be surprised to know that number is actually very low. That is all. So, as of right now, this law has not been changed in over 20 years. And it only applies, as I said, to, quote, reasonable and necessary adoption fees, court costs, attorney's fees, and other expenses. However, the expenses that come with adopting a child are not lawyers' fees and court costs, although those can be substantial. It's the costs that come in that first year: clothes, food, if the child is an infant, diapers, formula, etc. The cost of bringing a member of a new family member into your home. And so it makes sense that we simply change this law to make it applicable to the act of adoption. You adopt a child, you take the tax deduction. Period, end of story. We don't have to complicate it. We don't have to make it difficult. So these families are opening their hearts and their homes to children in need, and we as a state should do everything we can to encourage it. As you also can see by the fiscal note, it is a very minimal number. It is not going to cost us very much, given that this is still a deduction and not a credit. And in fact, this bill is so good that the Senate voted out the cross-file on third reader this morning. So hopefully we can follow suit as well. So with that, I ask for a favorable report on 180 and open to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Delegate Resnick, for having me. Thank you for everyone for having me. As I previously testified before the Senate Taxation Committee, my wife and I'm a clinical social worker. She's a public school teacher. So we adopted our daughter in November of 2019 after we got her when she was a 4-day-old baby. In May of 2018, we had 22 hours notice, and we were not in the least bit prepared because I don't know if you know, but most children who are placed into foster care in Maryland are between the ages of 5 and 18. So we were not expecting a baby. It was very costly. Delegate Resnick really helped us with solving some things like formula issues and working through the monthly stipend and daycare reimbursement at the time. However, once the adoption was finalized, all of those things stopped. So I believe a bill like this is really critical financially for families who do the right thing. As Delegate Resnick mentioned, this says every member of the Budget and Taxation Committee in the Senate has now signed on as co-sponsors, and it is bipartisan. So I think this is something that no matter your political affiliation, orientation, we can agree on is good for the state. I think it's good for families. And I know in our home, this would have really been significant for us in helping to give Zahara the things that she needs. She's doing well now. She's at or above her developmental level, so she's doing well. But we could use some more help from the state, and that's why I ask for a favorable opinion on House Bill 180. Thank you. And I'm available for any questions too, if anyone has any. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jones. Always great when constituents bring us wonderful bill ideas. We do have someone who is virtual that we'll take now, and then we'll do questions from the members. Brandon Russell.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Wilkins and distinguished members of the committee. I appreciate your time in listening to my testimony about HB 180. My name is Brandon Russell, and I fully support the change to the income tax subtraction for adopting a child. As you may know, fees incurred during the adoption process can be as much as $50,000 or maybe more. Doubling the income tax subtraction to $10,000 for a child without special needs and $12,000 for a child with special needs will help ease that burden. Families who seek to adopt, especially if they are middle class, will often find the cost prohibitive. Many couples have explored the option and determined at various times that it wasn't affordable. When considering the extra expenses a child brings to a household, spending many thousands of dollars on the adoption process alone is discouraging. I think this is particularly relevant to the LGBTQ+ community, who often choose the route of adoption when deciding to start a family. Anyone who considers adoption should be in a stable place in their life. That is true. But even if a couple could afford a child, they may not be able to afford the fees of the adoption process and the expenses thereafter. This deprives a child from a loving family and deprives couples who so desperately want to expand their family from doing so. This income tax subtraction will not completely solve these issues, but I believe it will provide many the opportunity to actually move forward with the adoption process. I ask for a favorable report on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. We do have a question for this panel. Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. The fantastic bill, and applaud your efforts here. I just had a question because I've dealt with some constituent issues dealing with this. In many cases where there may be a child is in the foster system, the way that it's been explained to me is that they are, in many instances, going to the foster home, going to a new parent, possibly going back to the original parent, and they're getting shuttled in and out of adoption. It's not necessarily always a permanent thing. So my question is, in the cases of that where it's somebody local, they've offered their child for adoption in the foster care system, how does this follow along with that? If they're in and out of the system or if they go back? We've had some cases where they've gone to the original parent 2 or 3 times and then ended up back with a foster parent. So you could just explain that to me.
Sure, I will do my best. I am not an expert on the process of adoption. What I know about specifically within the foster system is it's always the goal of the state to reunite children with their birth parents.
Correct, yep.
That is always the goal.
Yep.
And that may not always be possible. There may be multiple attempts while a child goes into the foster care system, back home and back and forth.
Right.
If a child enters final adoption, that's when this bill will apply.
Okay.
Once there's a
that's what I wanna
final
understand.
adoption, once there is a court ruling and paperwork and that is done, and there's no chance the child ever goes back to their birth parents or into the system,
Gotcha.
that's when this tax credit will take effect.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Delegate. Any other questions for this panel? Seeing none, that ends the bill hearing on HB 180.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate. We will now move to HB 316, Delegate Bagnell. And I have David Weber and David Dragus.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair and esteemed members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Heather Bagnell, District 33C in Anne Arundel County, here on behalf of House Bill 316. You have my written testimony, so I will summarize. This is a bill familiar to this committee. House Bill 316 establishes an income tax checkoff for voluntary contributions to the Maryland Veterans Trust Fund, a nonprofit designed to provide temporary assistance to veterans and their families struggling with basic financial needs. With this checkoff, Marylanders will be given a streamlined way to provide monetary assistance to veterans and their families across the state. As a result, the Veterans Trust Fund will see increased revenue, which aligns not only with the governor's priority of assisting veterans and their families, but also with the will of this body and our commitment to serve those who have served. I worked with the Comptroller's Office who raised concerns regarding the proposed timeline, so I have submitted an amendment to change the applicable tax year for the checkoff from after December 31st, 2022 to after December 31st, 2024. This language was agreed upon by the Comptroller's Office and addressed their concerns regarding a technology upgrade that might impede their ability to accomplish the proposed timeline in the original bill. You should see a letter in your packet confirming the support of the Comptroller's Office with the new timeline. HB 316 is a simple bill which will make a huge difference in the lives of veterans and their families. With that, I respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 316.
Thank you so much. The next person can begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair and members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm David Weber, Army veteran and resident of Annapolis. I'm here representing AARP Maryland, one of the largest membership-based organizations in the state with over 850,000 members. AARP Maryland supports HB 316, and we thank Delegate Bagnell and others for sponsoring this bill. You already have my written testimony, so I'll just touch on a couple quick points. By establishing a checkoff box on Maryland income tax return forms, an awareness of the Veterans Trust Fund would grow. Added awareness would allow more Marylanders to donate to the fund. Currently, 96.1% of the funds the trust has received are directly from the Maryland State Lottery and Maryland casinos. Increased awareness among Marylanders would allow the Maryland Veteran Trust Fund to continue its important work of helping veterans in need. For these reasons, we respectfully request a favorable report for House Bill 316.
Madam Vice Chair and members of the Ways and Means Committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor of Delegate Bagnell's bill. I'm Dave Dragic, a retired Army Colonel and Legislative Director of the Maryland Military Coalition, a nonpartisan nonprofit advocacy organization representing over 150,000 uniformed services-connected individuals. Over the last 2 years, the Maryland Veterans Trust Fund has granted record financial assistance, a total of approximately $588,000, to veterans and widows and widowers of veterans in need. Yet of the $824,000 in receipts during those 2 years, only $30,000, less than 4%, has come from citizens, veteran service organizations, local businesses, and community-sponsored fundraisers. That's because the general public does not know about this fund, that it's a 501c3 organization, and what good it does. Providing an income tax checkoff in the contributions section on the Maryland State Income Tax Form 502 will create more awareness of the trust fund and increase the level of giving by the general public. At no time over the last 5 fiscal years has the annual total received from the public ever been more than approximately $22,000. The Maryland Military Coalition believes that the level of donations needs to be changed for the betterment of the trust fund in the long term. Cost for making this addition to the tax form, as noted in the fiscal note, is an estimated $79,000 for one-time changes to the Comptroller's tax system, but the benefits to veterans in need of assistance cannot be measured, however. So the Maryland Military Coalition strongly supports HB 316 and asks for a favorable report from the committee, and we would like to thank Delegate Bagnell for sponsoring this legislation and appreciate her leadership on this issue.
Thank you so much, and thanks to you both for your service. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing this bill.
Thank you, you're worth it.
Appreciate that. Are there any questions for this panel? Delegate Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Bagnell, thank you for the bill. I just had a couple of questions. I believe the Colonel just stated that 4% of the contribution came from the general public. What is the goal to increase the awareness or the marketing to let the public know about this fund or this opportunity?
Well, having the checkbox on the tax return would already raise awareness. In terms of additional campaign,
Correct.
We can definitely circle back with the Veterans Affairs Commission once we pass the bill and figure out the best way to
Yeah, because there, do I
raise
say,
awareness.
even though it's on the tax return, it's still an awareness campaign that has to happen. right? Because most people are not paying attention to it, or if their accountant does not make them aware of it, it's still not going to happen. So that's just a concern that I have. And then secondly, what is the cost? I'm looking at page 2 of the bill, where it states that the administering of the from the contributions collected, distribute the amount necessary to be administered to the checkoff to an administrative cost account. What would be that figure? What's that cost for someone to administer this fund?
The annual report, the latest annual report for the trust fund dated August 31st of 2022 states that in FY21 there were no charges against the fund for costs of administration. $18 were used to order more bank deposit slips, and $180, 6 times 30, was spent on stop payment fees when checks went missing by mail or vendors. So the minimal cost is it's minimal cost from an administrative standpoint. And with regard to your first question about advertising, if you look at the Maryland resident instruction tax booklet, there's a page in the section that has 3 advertisements for 3 of the 4 listed under the contribution section. That would be an easy way for the fund to create more awareness, because it's in the Maryland resident instruction booklet for the Maryland individual income tax form.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate. Any other questions for this panel? Okay, seeing none, that ends the hearing on HB 316. Thank you,
very
Delegate.
much.
We will now begin the hearing on HB 263. Delegate Morgan, this is a St. Mary's County local bill that is sponsor only. You can begin when you're ready, Delegate.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. Congratulations, too, by the way.
Thank you.
Good to see my friends at Ways and Means. I think I'm in here a lot because of the local bills that I present. This is a very small bill that makes adjustments to our gaming law. What we found is we have a lot of senior centers in St. Mary's, and they like to operate games of like pitch, small stakes poker, and what we found was those games are actually illegal under current law. So this makes some adjustments to a $25 entry and nothing more than $50 per session. It's similar to a law that we passed a few years ago to Carroll County. So with that, I request a favorable review and be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Delegate Morgan on this bill? Seeing none, that ends the bill here on HB 263.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. We will now move to Delegate Rosenberg, HB 346. And on this list, if they're in the room, I have Dean Renee Hutchins, Ronald Wyke, and John Hart.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We're here to discuss funding for the low-income tax clinic at both law schools, as well as funding for similar services provided by the Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service. We came to you 2 years ago asking for legislation that would authorize $250,000 on an annual basis being used from the Unclaimed Property Fund to go towards the 2 clinics and MVLS to provide this service. Our clinics are known nationally for the work that they do, for the required nature of the clinic at Maryland, and not yet, or is it now? It's at both schools, excuse me. That was a Cardin bill, Ben Cardin legislation many moons ago. So we have required clinics. The low-income tax clinic needed this additional money to provide the necessary equipment, services for the students. And I would, in its wisdom, the committee decided 2 years ago to sunset the law that we passed. That sunset would expire at the end of the current calendar year. And what this bill would do is delete the sunset and make this a permanent appropriation from the unclaimed property fund. I would just add, especially in a session when we are about to consider the governor's path-breaking service legislation, the students who are in this clinic and in other clinics are exposed to the legal profession as providing service for those who would not otherwise have legal service, have legal protection when they have a problem, in this instance, with their state income tax. So I would urge a favorable report, and not having sat between two deans ever at law school, I will now defer to them.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. I'm very proud to be here with Delegate Rosenberg, with my fellow Dean, Dean Hutchins, and with John Hart from MVLS. As Delegate Rosenberg said, this bill builds on the success of a 2021 bill, which provided funding for our schools' low-income tax clinics. And Delegate Rosenberg saw a particular need in sponsoring that earlier legislation because the schools have a grant from the Federal Internal Revenue Service to serve clients in federal tax matters and when there were mixed federal and state matters, but we were not permitted to serve Marylanders who have Maryland state tax disputes. And the Rosenberg bill, which was enacted into law, addressed that. Now, Delegate Rosenberg comes back to address another need, which is we would like to have long-term funding so that we can plan a multi-year strategy to serve our clients. And the bill has been very successful. And what I think is interesting is that the three entities, the two law schools and MVLS, have each addressed the issue in different ways. And at the University of Baltimore, we are focused currently on the needs of immigrants and refugees in our state. And of course, Maryland has many communities of immigrants and refugees. They have particular needs in the tax area. Naturally, there are English proficiency issues and cultural issues. And we have been able to address this through a really targeted effort serving this particular vulnerable population in Maryland and using the authority that the General Assembly has provided to supplement our funding. So we very much support the bill that Delegate Rosenberg brings before you today, and we urge a favorable report on it.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I am delighted to appear before you. My name is Renee McDonald Hutchins, and I have the privilege of serving as the Dean at Maryland Carey Law. So as my fellow Dean Weish has indicated, this funding is critically important to the work that we're doing. As you well know, Maryland residents face overlapping tax obligations at the state and federal levels. This bill allows us to serve those state needs. So the work that is being done at Maryland Carey Law and our low income tax clinic is focused on Maryland residents. We have done outreach to more than 40,000 Maryland taxpayers. The work that we are doing is not only helping them address their tax issues to reduce their tax obligations, but also we work with them to ensure repayment. So we have helped multiple Maryland residents with setting up payment plans, with filing offers in compromise, with requesting hardship status. We are helping them to secure refunds in addition, state audits, and innocent spouse claims. This work is all critically important. And I want to note that we are not just helping Maryland resident taxpayers, we are also training the next generation of lawyers that is going to move out into the state to do this work on behalf of Maryland residents. So with that, I don't want to be redundant. I will turn the rest of my time over to our colleague from MVLS.
Hello, and thank you to all members of the committee for this opportunity to testify today. My name is John Hart, and I'm the director of the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic at Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service. House Bill 346 would allow MVLS to continue serving Maryland taxpayers who have Maryland-specific tax issues in a way that we just couldn't without this funding. Before we received state funding for this, we had to focus our outreach efforts on finding new clients to those with federal tax issues because those were the only cases that we could count towards our federal grant requirement and keep our clinic operating. Now, of course, we still did offer assistance, as did the other two clinics, I'm aware, to Marylanders with Maryland state-specific tax issues when they came to us. But because we didn't receive any funding for those cases, the number we could accept was always limited. State funding has changed that. Now we can reach out to clients with state-specific tax issues just as much as we reach out to clients who have problems with the IRS. In some cases, we find helping with Maryland state-specific tax issues is even more important. For example, Maryland has the authority to put a hold on professional or driver's licenses that people need to go to work and get any income. The IRS doesn't have that power in comparison. These problems can compound for our clients very quickly if they aren't familiar with the system and don't know the options available to them. This is why, you know, the efforts of an LITC, of our volunteers, are so important. They can get people out of these situations where they feel completely trapped and have no opportunity to pay off their debts. This bill would keep Marylanders working and improve the overall tax system by improving taxpayer education and support. And it's why I humbly request a favorable report on House Bill 346. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for coming to testify. Wonderful to see our deans here. We appreciate your time.
Sorry, you're out of time.
I'm out of time. We do have one question from Delegate Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate Rosenberg, for bringing this. I just had a couple of questions. Being that this will sunset at the end of the year, and I've heard from the Dean of some of the wonderful things that you guys are doing to help those low-income packed families. But what other data can you provide us as to what is the use of this money? Where is it going? And how is it being spent? Because out of the four different entities for this $250,000, that's roughly $62,000 each if you broke it down evenly. How is that money being utilized? And then what would be, you said to repeal the sunset. So in totality, how do we move forward to ensure that either A, you need more money, or two, that this money is being put to good use?
At Maryland Carry Law, we are using the money to pay the faculty member who is supervising the students. So students cannot do this work on their own. Students are required to be supervised by a licensed attorney. We hire a licensed attorney as a full-time faculty member, Beverly Winstead. I believe she appeared across the street yesterday on behalf of the companion bill. And so we use the money in part to subsidize her salary. It doesn't cover her full salary. The law school is committed to this work, and we are funding the other portion of her salary.
And the portion that's being subsidized by this fund, how much is that?
It is our share of the $250,000.
Okay. And that's just at your facility, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So do we know about the other three?
Yep. Similarly, at the University of Baltimore School of Law, we supplement the IRS grant and our state funding for the law school with this money to pay our director of the clinic, Jenna Shee. And then there are expenses associated with the legal work that this and other clinics do, postage and travel and other things to serve our clients effectively. As any law firm, and our clinics are in fact law firms, we have ancillary expenses that this state funding can address.
Okay. So I think what would be helpful for the committee is for us to receive how those dollars are being broken down. I also would like to see how many people have actually utilized your services based off of the help that you're receiving from the state. Will help us determine the magnitude of the dollars that's being utilized. And more importantly, at some point, should we increase this? Should you need more funding, or is this adequate funding for what you're utilizing the dollars for? So I think there's a twofold as we go back and do our work, is how that money is being spent, how many people are actually utilizing these dollars, and what is the demographics of the people that's coming from around the state of Maryland, or is it just in a concentrated area that is benefiting from the services that you guys provide? Would definitely be helpful. Yes, ma'am.
With regard to one of those points, I can provide some statistics, and we can certainly provide you greater detail after the hearing. So at Maryland Carry Law, we have done outreach to more than 40,000 Maryland residents. With regard to the services that we provide, we have provided actual representation to approximately 100 Maryland residents, and we are servicing clients from 15 counties from east to west across the state.
Sounds like you're doing a great job. I just need to know what everybody else is doing.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you to the chair of the Revenue Subcommittee. We have a question from Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you said that 40,000 people reach out to this, and how many actually are being served? Is that to reach out, actually talk to them and give them service, write the paperwork for them?
So the 40,000 is outreach to residents to make them aware of our services and to provide them with information about the services that we provide. We actually represented approximately 100 people. So approximately 7 taxpayers with regard to refunds, approximately 26 taxpayers with regard to state audits, approximately 2 taxpayers with regard to innocent spouse claims. We represented another 60 taxpayers, 60, with regard to their repayment of outstanding Maryland taxes, and those clients were residents of approximately 15 counties.
I see. So what's the average tax return associated with that?
I don't have that detail, but I can certainly get it to you.
I see. Thank you. I just would say $14 million is huge money. If we only part of that only serve 100 people, I have an issue with that. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Any other questions for this panel? Delegate Fair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick clarification. Each institution gets about $83,000. Is that correct? Each year?
That's a third.
A third, a third, and a third?
I think that's right.
Okay, great. And that money is used, as you said, in 1 year to provide services to about 100 individuals?
It is used to provide actual representation to approximately 100 individuals, but to provide information and outreach to more than 40,000 residents.
Yeah, perfect. For that 83,000. Thank you.
Any other questions for this panel? Revenue Subcommittee Chair, Delegate Barnes.
Maybe I'm looking at this wrong. Is it 3 entities or 4 entities? Because I'm reading that the grant was used for the University of Maryland School of Law, University of Baltimore School of Law, and the Maryland Volunteer Lawyers Association. Is that right? So it's just the 3. Okay, thank you.
Delegate Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate Rosenberg, for bringing this bill to our attention. I'm really appreciative of what you're doing because my constituents in Southern Maryland, Charles County, I don't know if that's one of the counties, certainly rely upon legal aid and other entities. And so to assist the constituents and to increase the numbers, please advise us how we as members of the Maryland General Assembly can share this information with our constituents. And that is simply a request that I'm asking. Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony.
Thank you.
On House Bill 346, House Bill 187, Delegate Ivy. And who would you like to bring up with you? Whenever you're situated and ready, Delegate Ivy, you can begin.
Former Ways and Means member who abandoned us.
No.
Abandoned us, jumped ship.
Once a Ways and Means member, always a Ways and Means member. And thank you, Madam Chair.
We'll see when we're looking at your bills.
Yeah. Well, I will say for the record that one of the hardest decisions for me to make was to leave this committee. Under your leadership, you really did help me pass more bills than I'd ever pass altogether combined. So it truly was a very difficult thing for me to do. I just want to say that.
Well, we miss you. I'm just teasing.
No, I miss you all very much. Specifically, well, he's not here, so I won't call him out. For the record, Delegate Julian Ivey here, presenting House Bill 187. It's a simple bill. It's got a fiscal note that's popping out, but God bless DLS. We're all going to massage it and work through this. But this piece of legislation just exempts the sale of secondhand apparel costing $20 or less from the state sales and use tax. Secondhand apparel is defined as clothing or footwear that has been previously sold to a customer and is offered for resale. The rationale being here that we've already, as a state, got our bite at the apple. The other, and I think more significant piece is, these are really trying times that we're in with inflation rising through the roof. Individuals who are going to these secondhand apparel stores, many of them really are looking for ways to lower their bottom line, whether they're providing for their family or for themselves, they're in school, or they're paying for their new infant who is rapidly growing at an astounding rate. We as a state have an opportunity here to give these individuals a little bit of relief. I have joining with me today some experts on the issue, but I think all of us can kind of see the intent and the importance of this issue, and I hope that we can work together to have a favorable report on House Bill 187. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from these individuals.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Bill Castelli with Rifkin, Weiner, and Livingston on behalf of the Savers Corporation today. And before we get into what the bill does, and with me today is James Allen, their Director of Government Affairs and Sustainability, as well as Andres Gonzalez, who is a district manager, and Rich Medway, who's in the audience today, who is their Chief Compliance Officer and counsel. I do want to talk, before they get into why this is a good bill, what it does for families and the environment, talk a little bit about the fiscal note. The fiscal note of this bill is significant, and we were very shocked by it for this reason. Last year, there was legislation that was introduced before the legislature that applied to all secondhand goods. It wasn't just textiles, there was no dollar limit on it, so whether it's antiques, jewelry, clothes, household goods, recreational goods, didn't matter. That came out with a fiscal note. This bill scaled that dramatically, scaled it down to just textiles, clothing, and scaled it to just clothing, textiles under $20. So instead of the fiscal note going way, way down, which is what we expected, it went way, way up. And we did take a look at why that is true. They're using two very different data sources in terms of national sales of secondhand goods. But we did want to just lay it out to the committee that we are certainly willing to work with this committee and figure out a way to make sure that this makes sense for the state in terms of its fiscal impact and still continue to do good things for families and the environment.
Whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Bill, and good afternoon, Chair Atterbury and members of the committee. I'm James Allen, Director of Government Affairs and Sustainability at Savers. Our General Counsel and Chief Compliance and Sustainability Officer, Rich Medway, is also here with us, and he's a Montgomery County native, too. Thank you, Delegate Ivey, for your sponsorship. This bill is really exciting. We see it as a win-win for Maryland's continued leadership on the environment and for tax policies that help families. We really do hope that this can be a model for other states. At Savers, we really are committed to Maryland. With 12 stores across our Savers, Value Village, Unique, and Second Avenue brands, we have 1,200 team members, and we opened our first U.S. centralized processing center in the Hyattsville Landover area just last month. That's a really exciting and innovative $6 million facility. If you go to one of our stores, over 90% of the items there have been purchased from a nonprofit organization. People donate reusable items to a nonprofit, and we buy those from the nonprofit. Over a recent 5-year period, we paid our nonprofit partners in Maryland about $2.5 million for that supply. And last year, our teams kept approximately 48 million pounds of reusable material out of Maryland's waste stream. A recent study by SAGE said that in order to create that fiber new would create the same carbon as 17,000 new passenger cars. So you may be asking why a tax credit, why a sales tax exemption bill? And we're not asking for a tax credit for savers. Rather, this really is two key goals focused on consumers and the environment. First, we really want to help consumers on tight budgets who come to thrift stores to purchase necessities. 71% of shoppers in a recent national study responded that secondhand shopping helps them stretch their clothing dollar. And second, we want to highlight the environmental benefits of reuse and to incentivize secondhand purchasing. The average American throws away 81 pounds of clothing every year. There are estimates that about 85% of clothing ends up in landfills, and we're really just trying to make secondhand second nature. So thank you for your consideration, and we respectfully request a favorable report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and other members of the committee. I am Andres Gonzalez, a proud district manager with Savers. I previously worked with Second Avenue thrift superstores, thrift retailer recently acquired by Savers as part of the commitment to growing in Maryland. Being part of Savers has been a positive experience. We have great teams, we have a great benefits package, and we are truly committed to growing talent from within and therefore expanding professional opportunities for our team members. I currently oversee 5 stores. Within those 5 stores, I work directly with five managers. Those 5 managers each oversee or supervise over 100 team members, all of whom have been with us. We have a great history of longevity. Our team members across all 5 stores. We merchandise approximately 60,000 items in each one of these stores. All these items are purchased from local nonprofits and therefore keeping all of these items out of landfills and helping the environment. As James mentioned earlier, we have a very diverse and large customer base. They all come to our stores for different reasons. We have the customers that come for us for the thrill of the hunt. We have the customers that are truly environmentally conscious. But widely, we do have what we call our need customer, customers that come in search of value and in search of items of high quality. Therefore, this bill will help them in that effort to really help their budgets. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Brad Rifkin here on behalf of Savers. I want to thank many of you for meeting with us over the interim, and Madam Chair for you coming out and actually touring one of the facilities. We greatly appreciate it. Look, you know, the real point here is to promote secondhand purchasing. It has an incredible environmental impact, and it has an incredible impact on people who are price sensitive and price conscious. And so we can't think of a better state to roll that out in than the state of Maryland. So Savers, with an enormous footprint here in the state, thought Maryland was a great place to start this initiative and roll it out nationwide. Frankly, the value here in keeping items out of landfills, the value in keeping people from purchasing items firsthand, which is incredibly costly to the environment, the value in keeping the price low for individuals who are price conscious, all of these things truly matter. And we cannot think of a better place to start that than here in the state of Maryland. Look, we're very aware of the fiscal note. Mr. Castelli raised it. It was kind of strange to see a fiscal note almost double when we're trying to scale back the scope of what was introduced last year in another initiative for the secondhand market. But we want to work with the subcommittee, Mr. Chair. We want to work with you. We want to work with the rest of the committee to find an answer here, because we do think even if we scale it back in some form or fashion, there's something to be done. And we truly hope that the committee sees the value in that. So for those reasons, we respectfully request a favorable report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have just a few, actually. So I heard 60,000 items. So we picked $20. Was it because that represented a break point for a certain percentage of the clothing items that you have in your in your facility that sell for less than $20?
Sure, thanks for that question. We didn't have a specific method. We were just trying to think of a reasonable amount that, we're trying to make this really focused toward the need-based shopper. And so $20 seemed like a good amount where, someone coming in for essential items for themselves or their family on the clothing and shoe side would, that just seemed like a low, reasonable price point.
It might even encourage you to price things under, if you have something you might go for 22, so let's offer it for 19, because it's more likely to move without tax on it. We can say it's tax-free. The other one is, are there any county recycling programs for textiles in the state of Maryland or in other places, but mostly in Maryland?
Sure. So Bill took a look at that, and what was interesting was that there's really kind of a variety of situations across the counties, and the bottom line is there aren't really a lot of formal programs. There are some counties that try to collect textiles at the transfer station level. There are others that don't have anything formal, and then most of them do in some way point people to donate their items to a nonprofit organization that collects them. In our case, we buy those items from nonprofit organizations, but there are others out there as well. So really the thrift industry is the place that's handling this material now and can take it off the hands of consumers so that it does not end up in the landfill. That same SAGE report I referenced looked at the 48 million pounds that we took out of the Maryland waste stream last year and estimated that saved the Maryland landfill, saved $1.6 million in costs to the taxpayer related to Maryland landfill disposal. So we do think that we're providing a service where there currently is a gap in other opportunities to reuse the material and keep it in circulation.
Okay, and then one more, if I may, Madam Chair. So the other thing is we would be on the vanguard here. So we don't have anybody to compare if sales increase or anything. We would be the pilot, as it were, in the country for this.
That's our understanding, exactly. This would be Maryland taking a lead across the country to say we value this both on the consumer and on the environmental side.
What's interesting about that, if I can just add, is that there are other states, I think Massachusetts, New York, and others, that actually exempt firsthand up to like $150, $175. There are certainly exceptions to that, but again, what we are kind of pushing in this situation is truly the environmental play and an understanding of price consciousness. So that's the importance of secondhand goods.
Thank you for your answers.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think you answered one question. It does not, maybe not increase your sale. So because we hear a lot of tax exemption bills, for example, exempting piano, many other stuff, right? So I just wonder, definitely I see there's a need and there's a direction, but how about electronics, right? Many other stuff. How do you see your future in terms of tax exemption for the secondhand goods?
We think, if I can take a stab, sure. The importance here is we're talking about necessity items. So pianos are great, and I'm not going to sit here and speak to another bill, but when we're talking about apparel, that's a necessity for an individual. You all took action last year to pass sales tax exemption bills for, I think, infant products and car seats and other things that, and toothpaste. I mean, these things are incredibly important to everybody. So, this, I think, fits in that same ballpark.
I see. Madam Chair, can I ask another question? So, because Delegate Ebersole talked about the $20 range, right? How about instead of exam, how about the cut from 6% to 3%? The other approach looks at, then you don't think about the price range at all.
I think we're open to any and all options to massage this issue. If it's not just a full exemption, there are other ways to go about it. You could sunset something. You could actually see what the real number is that, the state is theoretically not generating in revenue. But we're open to any ways to work on this.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the committee? I have a quick question. First, I want to thank you for having me out at the store, and Mr. Gonzalez gave me a great tour, and I don't think that you can appreciate it unless you've actually been there. So I would like you to just talk about how big the store is, how many customers come through there. So I'll start with that.
Madam Chair, you actually visited our location in Laurel, Maryland. This happens to be our largest location in the company. The facility itself it's 83,000 square feet. Our sales floor alone is close to 55,000 square feet. Given the season, we average around 7,500 paying customers. And that's the benefit of this. Most of those customers come because they need to be there. And the value that we offer is really not matched anywhere in a traditional retail environment. And that's why they keep coming, for their families.
And I'm going to try to phrase this as a question because we ask questions here, but is it fair to say, I mean, the store is more organized than any department store that I have been in terms of it being clean and the aisles and everything is impeccably labeled? Is that a fair description?
It is. And as you mentioned, it takes a lot of work to do that. So we're very proud of our teams. That one particular store has over 200 team members. 75% of them are full-timers. They work over 40 hours. So yes, we're very proud of that store. And I would dare say that is not our best-looking store because it's too large to maintain.
You answered another question, was about how many folks you have employed there, which I think you said was about 200. Could you sort of describe, I may have missed it, describe the environmental piece in terms of when I did the tour, there was the compacting, if I'm
Correct.
using the right terminology, and there was the sorting. If you could just sort of walk us through what you do actually there.
Absolutely. So as you can imagine, all of our product is purchased from nonprofits. Well, these goods are donated. We would love to sell each one of those items that we collect and that we purchase, but the reality is that not all of them are in great shape. So we have to recycle a large percentage of what we actually bring into our stores. In order for us to do that and be able to transport it correctly, we need to compact it in what we call clothing bales. You may all be familiar with baling machines. So we do bale our textiles, and we make 1,000-pound packs, and that eases transportation for all these textiles. These packs are then recycled where they can be, but the goal is always to utilize these items in its original purpose. So there are other markets, secondary markets, that can actually make use of those products.
So this is my last question. I see Delegate Long has a question. But my last question is, so when you say that there are secondhand markets, because I didn't understand, other people here I'm sure certainly understand. So can you just give like an example of what that is? So after you compact the products, what other secondhand markets are you talking about?
Sure, thank you for that question. So we do bale the items up, and we really do try to keep that out of landfill to the extent possible. So we have a division of the company that works with secondary material brokers that try to find a productive use for that material. So some of it can be reused in other markets overseas. A shirt is a shirt in places where that's needed. Other items can be broken down into wiping rags to be used in industrial settings, so it's a reused item in that context. And some of the material can be shredded down for insulation or in the carpet pad. You notice there are different threads of different color. That's called shoddy, and so that often comes from clothing that has been shredded down. So we do try to find places where the stuff can be kept out of the landfill.
Thank you. It was a very interesting visit. I took my daughter. Take your kids. Delegate Long.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question I have is, how do you interact with the different, wait a second, just slipped my mind that quick. The other used clothing outlets, as far as like, who is it that has Goodwill? I'm sorry, that's what I was thinking about. Goodwill and also the Salvation Army. How do you deal with that as far as you buy from these people, or are you in competition with Goodwill?
Thank you for the question. We don't necessarily buy from them. They are there doing. They have a different business model. We partner with other nonprofit organizations where we have a contract to purchase clothing and other items either that they collect and that we buy from them, that they bring to us, and we weigh and pay for everything, whether or not we can sell it in the store. Actually, we buy everything that they bring to us, or we do at several of our stores in Maryland accept donations on behalf of that nonprofit organization. And so we will take that item on their behalf, weigh it, measure it, and pay the nonprofit organization. So we do have separate nonprofit partners. Most, if not all of them, don't want to be in the thrift business. They don't want to be running stores and having that overhead, and so they have found it's a way to generate unrestricted revenue for their organizations to be in the business of collecting donations and selling them to us.
Is Purple Heart included with your?
Yes, they are a partner. We do buy product from them. Yes.
Okay. And I guess my last question is, at one time they actually used to export textiles that were bundled up. We were talking about these 1,000-pound bundles years ago. I don't know where they were going, but I just remember seeing trucks with them and being exported. There's no market for that anymore?
There are markets in certain overseas markets where they don't have local clothing manufacturing and access to clothing, where it provides a really helpful and unique opportunity for clothing and even micro businesses. Ultimately, these things can be sold at a micro level by individual entrepreneurs in those locations well after it's left us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Delegate Grossman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate Ivid, for bringing this forward. As a professional thrifter, and I don't mean shopping, but it's actually what I do in my day job, I'm just curious what impact, if any, as we're seeing larger retailers like Walmart and others explore buyback and secondhand projects, you would see if that grows, that industry or other avenue having on a bill like this. I would imagine it might impact the fiscal note even more if we saw Walmart opening thrift.
I think it could definitely impact the fiscal note, but again, there are ways that we can craft amendments to be very narrow. Additionally, I think we should be very happy to have industries take that initiative and grow the secondhand market. It truly, I mean, I can't emphasize enough how much waste goes into producing a garment. I mean, just that firsthand sale is an incredible, detriment to the environment. So we want to encourage more and more and more secondhand sales. So yeah, it could absolutely have an impact on the fiscal note, but I think there are ways we can draft around that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Delegate Ivy.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
That concludes the testimony on House Bill 187. Now calling Madam Vice Chair, House Bill 268. And Cindy Smalls, Kaylee Schumitz, and Samantha Zorling can come on up with Madam Vice Chair.
Good afternoon, colleagues. For the record, I am Delegate Janelle Wilkins, and I am presenting HB 268, which deals with the Maryland estate tax and unified credit. What this bill does is that currently, when property tax is handed down in terms of an inheritance, we currently exempt $5 million of those taxes. What this bill would do is reduce that exemption to $1 million. And the reason for this is that taxing inherited wealth is really important to making sure we have an equitable tax system. The lion's share of wealth in America is really in the hands of a few. The top 1% of households own almost 40% of the country's wealth. And while it is easier to have low or no taxes for wealthy families, what happens, as we know in this committee, is that it reduces revenues available for our schools, for transportation, and for healthcare. So with the current exemption of $5 million, this bill really seeks to ensure that our wealthy Marylanders are paying their fair share in taxes, and I urge a favorable report on HB 268.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Whoever would like to go next.
Thank you, Chair Atterbury and members of the committee. My name is Callie Schumitz. I'm with the Maryland Center on Economic Policy, and we support HB 268 and included a similar proposal in a recent publication we put out, which is a roadmap for tax justice in Maryland, because an estate tax is part of an equitable tax system that funds the public services that allow our communities to thrive. When Maryland increased its estate tax exemption in 2014, it was a gift to multimillionaire and billionaire families, allowing them to pass more of their built-up wealth between generations tax-free and that has cost Maryland hundreds of millions of dollars over the ensuing years that could have gone to support our schools, parks, roads, healthcare, and the other public services that Maryland families and businesses rely on. Reducing taxes on multimillionaires' inherited wealth also reinforces the deep and growing inequities in our country. As Delegate Wilkins was just explaining, the top 1% of households now own almost 40% of the country's wealth. And because of the range of structural barriers built into our economy, the bulk of these household assets nationwide are controlled by wealthy white households. Like the personal income tax, the estate tax has a range of complicated deductions and exemptions that reduce the taxable portion of the estate, and it is taxed on a progressive rate scale. So when in the past we exempted $1 million of the taxable value of estates, which HB 268 would return us to, 97% of estates in Maryland were not subject to the estate tax. There are also additional exemptions and a lower rate that protect family farms and other agricultural properties. And it's important to note that most of this built-up wealth that's passed down through estates has never been subject to any tax at all. We would ask for a favorable report on House Bill 268. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Cindy Smalls, representing ASME. We represent state employees and higher ed, and employees on the local level as well. I am here in support of HB 268, and I want to thank the delegate for introducing this bill. When it was introduced before, we were supportive of it. As state employees, we're always looking for revenue with priorities that we have in the state. We are looking at understaffing, infrastructures of our buildings and state facilities. Revenues is something that we are fighting for, and we think it's smart, that the state, begin to look at ways that we can generate revenue. And we believe this bill creates a path or a conversation about just that, creating additional revenues to be able to support the priorities that we have in our state with schools and et cetera. So with that, we stand in support, and we hope the committee urge a favorable report on HB 268. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Samantha Zwirling on behalf of the Maryland State Education Association, representing 75,000 educators across the state of Maryland. We are here in support of HB 268. We believe that this will, as many others said, generate revenue, but in a fair manner that doesn't put a burden on working people of Maryland. And this committee talks a lot about how we can support our students. We think this is another way that we can look at supporting our students and making sure that our schools have the resources they need, especially as we've identified over 110,000 students who are living in poverty since last year. And so the state, while you all, and especially this committee, has done a lot to take hard votes to raise the revenue needed, and the governor put in another $500 million to pay for the blueprint in years coming. This is another way that we can look at raising revenue while also creating a fair tax structure that gets at wealth inequality. So we are here in strong support of HB 268 and urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Questions, Delegate Buckle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I get what you're trying to say, but $1 million, that would take us back to where we were in 2015 before the federal tax amounts began to change. I hear an awful lot of discussion this year about we have to change things. We have to take into effect inflation and other values. So $1 million today, from what I'm seeing from the testimony of the professional accountants and people who deals with those, that would be $1.25 million. If you had $1 million in your estate in 2015, it would correlate today to $1.25 million. So are we in fact rolling back and creating even more taxes than what we really ever had? I mean, that's for anybody, I guess. It seems like it's just a number picked out of the air that doesn't really relate to modern realities?
I can't say whether it was picked out of the air. I think our position has been all along that we should not have increased the exemption. I think our organization has been consistent on that position since it was changed. And as I was explaining, you're not talking about an estate that is only $1 million. That's they get the tax starts to apply on $1 million of the taxable portion of the estate, which interacts with the federal estate tax, passes down to the state level, and there's additional exemptions and things like that. So it's really very large estates, much larger than $1 million, that would be subject to any tax at all. So we still think it would apply to a very small portion of multimillionaire, billion-dollar estates. And our position is that it is fair to ask folks to pay taxes on that wealth. And again, this is often ProPublica had some great reporting on this, on all the ways that these ultra-rich folks are able to build up wealth and pay no taxes on it, and then pass that untaxed wealth onto their heirs, and the estate tax is a way to capture that.
Okay, so I could be putting another question though, but that's not what we're talking about. People who are billionaires that die in Maryland, they're already paying federal estate taxes and they're paying Maryland. People who have a federal net estate tax of $6 million, they're already paying, because our number is 5. The federal estate tax includes, for the federal estate tax base, it includes insurance proceeds. It includes the value of your house. So I just looked it up in 3 minutes. The the median household value for Montgomery County, Maryland is just under $600,000 today. So if I have a 71-year-old father who dies and owns his house and it's valued at $625,000, and he purchased a $200,000 life insurance policy, kicks him to $825,000, and he has $200,000 at 71 years old in a 401k, which I would submit to you is not very much money to have in your 70s in a 401k. Under this bill, he's a millionaire that the estate tax kicks in for, correct? He's not some rich guy that has an island somewhere. I mean, he's just a guy who lives in a normal neighborhood in Montgomery County, maybe was a school teacher that's retired, had an insurance policy.
And he would still pay there would be no tax on the state on the first $1 million. It's not like you hit $1 million and then you pay the tax. It's an exemption.
So why is he paying it all, though? Why is he getting lumped in with, we're going after money of the ultra wealthy? That's okay. Thank you.
But I would also say, Delegate, that if you wanted to amend the bill to make it 1.2 million, MSA would absolutely support that.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Miller, then Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a carve-out for agriculture and farms?
Yes, I addressed that in my testimony.
Okay, what was that?
There's an additional $5 million exemption for farms, and they are not subject to the same progressive rate. It's a flat, lower rate for agricultural property.
Do you know about how much like the farms are worth, like out in Frederick County and things like that? Because these kind of things can put farms and agriculture out of business and not allow them to be passed from family to family?
Yes, that is why the legislature in 2012 passed legislation addressing farms specifically. There are a number of provisions protecting farms in law already that this bill does not change.
All right, so they would still be protected? Okay.
Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have a question about that $1 million, right? So is that including the housing property value plus their other income, is that right?
It's based on the total taxable value of the estate after a number of deductions and exemptions that are included in the federal estate tax. I'm not a tax attorney. I can't get into I don't know all of the specifics, but that is, similar. You have what your gross income tax is, and then your taxable income. It's the same with the state. So there's a number of things that apply before you get to the taxable value, and that's what the taxes apply. And then the Maryland estate tax exempts the first $1 million from taxation. There's different rates depending. The larger the estate, similar to the income tax, the higher the tax rate is.
So that does not include in property value, right?
It
That-
does.
It does.
It includes property, as Delegate Buckles explained. It's the entire value of the estate, which can include cash, stocks.
I see. Because I just see in many counties, right, a lot of property valued to $800,000 and maybe probably close to $1 million. This is just kind of tax everything they have right now because if their property value close that. That's my question there. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Are there any further questions for this panel from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 268. Calling House Bill 227. Who remembers? Nobody else is going 227? Thank you, Delegate Feldmark. Okay, wake up, committee. 227, and we have presenting on behalf of Delegate Charles, who is testifying in E&T, Miss Ashley Lazanderi Pinto. Hopefully I said that correctly.
It's Landerberry, but you got it.
Okay. Whenever you're ready, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of the House Ways and Means Committee. For the record, my name is Ashley Pinto. I am a legislative intern from the University of Maryland, and I am grateful for the opportunity to present testimony on behalf of Delegate Nick Charles in support of HB 227. Delegate Charles sends his regrets for not being here today, as he is in another bill hearing in the E&T committee. This bill serves as a catalyst to help our most vulnerable veterans, those who gave so much of their life and have now received a 100% service disabled rating from the United States Department of Veteran Affairs. Under law, a veteran who is at least 55 years old can write the first $15,000 of military retirement income off their taxes. If HB 227 passes, when a veteran meets the profile of being retired and 100% service disabled, they would now be able to write off the first $20,000. This $5,000 additional write-off is the least the state can do for the men and women who have bravely served our country and underwent significant trauma to their mental and physical health. According to the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are only about 700 veterans who classify as 100% service-connected disabled in our state. Seeing that this bill affects veterans who are both 100% service disabled and who are retired, it is predicted that less than 700 veterans will receive the increased subtraction modification. Although this bill affects a small subset group of people, these people not only need this tax break, but deserve it. Not every veteran is retired from military service, and not every veteran has 100% disability rating from the United States Veteran Affairs. Therefore, the fiscal impact on the state is limited, but the impact of disabled veterans have $5,000 back in their pocket to spend into our economy will be huge. Additionally, it should be noted that Delegate Charles is full support and is co-sponsor of HB 554, the Keep Our Heroes Home Act requested by Governor Westmore. HB 554 will increase subtraction modification to $25,000 regardless of age and moves Maryland in the direction it needs to move in to provide a better environment for veterans. Our office still asks that you move favorably on this bill, HB 227, just as a placeholder and mechanism if for some off-chance reason HB 554 does not move forward. Delegate Charles thanks you for taking the time to hear this bill. I will ask you all for a favorable report for HB 227. If there are any questions, I will write them down and have our office respond to you directly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everybody's light was on, but, Thank you, and seeing no questions, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 227. Great job.
Thank you.
Calling House Bill 191, Delegate Palakovich Carr. and Callie Schumitz can come on up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I'm Delegate Julie Polakovich-Carr, here to present House Bill 191. Colleagues, this is probably one of the clearest cut tax reforms that I've brought to the committee over the years in terms of the need for this bill. So this bill would end the state tax break given to corporations who engage in wrongdoing. Companies that harm the environment, engage in financial wrongdoing, or sell dangerous products and then reach a settlement with the government or are ordered by the courts to pay a fine shouldn't be able to write off their restitution payments on their taxes, but they often do. To be clear, we didn't create this egregious tax loophole, our friends in Congress did, but because our state uses a taxpayer's federal adjusted gross income as the starting point for calculating a person or company's Maryland tax liability, and we haven't decoupled from this particular federal tax provision, corporate wrongdoers are often getting a tax break here in Maryland as well as at the federal level. So this unjust tax break reduces both the incentive of companies to comply with the law and the value of the redress that these bad actors pay. Unfortunately, use of this tax loophole is commonplace, and companies treat their restitution payments as part of the cost of doing business. Some particularly egregious examples include the 2010 Deepwater Horizon rig explosion and oil spill, where at least 80% of the $42 billion paid out by BP qualified for a tax deduction. BP saved an estimated $10 to $14 billion. Many of the banks that contributed to the financial crisis of 2007-2008 were able to deduct part of their multi-billion-dollar settlements. JP Morgan Chase wrote off more than half of its $13 billion deal with the Justice Department, and 70% of Bank of America's $17 billion settlement was eligible for a tax break. More locally, it's possible that this tax break will lessen the financial impact of settlements reached by our Attorney General. Just in the last year, the AG reached a $40 million settlement with the Sackler family for its role in the opioid crisis, a $13 million settlement with Juul over its sales practices, a $9 million settlement with Google over its privacy practices, and a $3 million settlement with Jared Kushner-owned Westminster Management over poor housing conditions. If we want to make sure these companies feel the full effect of their mandated financial restitution, we need to close this tax loophole and end the subsidies by Maryland taxpayers for corporate wrongdoing. Thank you.
Thank you again, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Callie Schumitz with the Maryland Center on Economic Policy, here in support of House Bill 191, because like our state budget, we believe that our tax system should be a reflection of our values. Delegate Polakovich-Carr just did a great job providing a lot of thorough examples of why this does not seem to be in line with the values that most Marylanders hold. Well, the federal deduction that is addressed by HB 191 is limited. We believe that there is no reason a business that has violated civil or criminal law should be able to get a tax break that offsets the cost of their punishment. Based on the research that we've done, that could include things like payments to a victims fund or renovating a building that was needed changes to address a violation. And this is not a tax provision that Maryland has intentionally chosen. It exists in our tax code because we are coupled to the federal tax law. We do have the choice to decouple and not double down on this federal tax break. There's polling that's been done in Maryland that shows that most Marylanders would feel better about paying their own taxes if they knew that our tax system was fair and that our state was making changes to make our tax system more equitable. And we think this is a common sense change that would align with Marylanders' values, and we would ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Delegate Hornberger?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just some quick questions, because I'm just trying to understand how this would be administered. Would these be settlements against individuals, or settlements against government?
Only if it's a government entity, but it's federal, state, or local government. It applies to all. And in terms of administration, maybe to anticipate your next question, as of this year, the IRS already requires that any of these settlements for $50,000 or above, that the government entity, there's a new form basically that they have to complete. So there's already record keeping that's happening.
that would help us enforce this.
So, I mean, this sounds kind of like a pile-on. So if I'm assessed a fine, for example, and then I have another financial hit because I can't deduct that off my taxes, isn't the purpose of said fine to be a measurement of the severity of the crime?
Well, right now they're getting a tax break on it, so they aren't paying the full fine. So I would say the baseline right now is they're ordered to pay X amount of dollars, but they're paying less than that now. So we're saying, no, the amount you were ordered to pay is the amount you should actually pay. They're not getting taxed on top of it. It's just we're ending the current break they're getting. That lessens the fine.
Yeah, I get that, but it's a direct extension of the fine. So why wouldn't you just increase said fine?
Well, I can't directly answer that. I'll say that more recently, because especially at the federal level, federal agencies are aware that companies are taking deductions on this. They've actually started saying in some small number of settlements that actually you cannot deduct this, and sometimes that is written into the settlement language, but that isn't the status quo at the moment.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Both of you can stay seated. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 191. Calling House Bill 211, Delegate Plakovich-Carr, Miranda Willems can come forward, and Ms. Kaylee Shumitz is already here. And then we have one unfavorable signed up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So HB 211. Colleagues, we spend a lot of time in this committee talking about tax policy, and this bill certainly has a lot of tax policy in it, but in its heart, this bill really is about affordable housing, because we have a desperate need for more affordable housing in Maryland. Our Department of Housing and Community Development has said that we are short 85,000 affordable housing units right now. That's a number that's going to more than double this decade. We've seen the effects of a very hot real estate market in terms of pricing buyers out of the market in recent years. Rents in Maryland have increased by 12% in just 1 year, and fully half of Americans are cost burdened by their housing. So there definitely is a need for all levels of government to be acting on this. This bill would generate and provide $20 million a year for our state's rental housing fund. You'll hear more about that from one of my panelists, but this has been a really successful program that provides low interest loans to finance the building and rehabilitation of affordable housing in our state. And so basically we're generating that money by tightening up 3 real estate related tax provisions. The first one would end the tax break for out-of-state vacation homes. You know, simply put, like if you're wealthy enough to own multiple homes, you don't need a tax break from Maryland for your out-of-state home, especially when 1 in 3 Marylanders don't even own their home. So this specifically ends the mortgage interest deduction for an out-of-state vacation home. It doesn't make sense for us to be subsidizing Marylanders to be spending time out of our state, where they are not supporting our local businesses, local jobs, and we are not collecting tax revenue on their purchases through, sales and use tax, gasoline tax, et cetera. Wisconsin actually made this change a number of years ago. They still give the tax break for a secondary home that's in-state, but they don't give it any longer for out-of-state homes, and we should follow their lead. The second change in the bill would means test the first-time homebuyer tax break. I think it's great that we're helping people to afford their first home in Maryland, but we should make sure that tax break is actually being targeted to the people who need the financial help. So this provision would cap the first-time homebuyer transfer tax exemption to the first $1 million of home value. So all first-time home buyers would get the break, the discounted rate that exists now for the first $1 million of home value. But if they are fortunate enough to be a first-time home buyer buying a home for more than $1 million, they would pay the normal transfer tax rate for the value above $1 million. And I will note that $1 million is well above our state's median home value of $400,000. And even in high-cost jurisdictions like Montgomery County, the median home value is still in the 500,000s. So lastly, the bill would decouple from the federal tax incentives for investments in opportunity zones. That actually has passed this committee previously and the House as a standalone bill back in 2020 and 2021. Opportunity zones are a federal tax incentive that aims to direct investments into low-income neighborhoods. Colleagues, you may remember I talked about enterprise zones last week. This program is a more recent one. It shares a lot of similarities with enterprise zones, especially in terms of the mixed outcomes. Basically, research is showing that opportunity zones haven't been good at creating jobs for local residents. The money's largely going off to better communities, not the most distressed communities. And in the case of opportunity zones, the tax break doesn't even go to businesses. It goes to the investors who are investing in real estate deals in these neighborhoods. And those investors tend to be very wealthy their median household income for a typical opportunity zone investor is $741,000. So these investors are getting a break both at the federal and on the state side, even if they're investing in an opportunity zone in another state. That was one of the main drivers for why we passed this as a standalone bill twice before, and in the same reason why 7 other states have either fully or partially decoupled from this particular federal provision, and we should do the same. So in sum, we have a tremendous amount of need for affordable housing in Maryland. The need is only growing, and we can help alleviate this problem by better targeting our real estate tax incentives. And I will just note that I have seen the comptroller's testimony, and I'm supportive of their proposed amendment on the opportunity zone piece. Thank you.
Are there any, Delegate Buckle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the $20 million for the rental housing program, that would be in addition to what, I think I saw something in the fiscal note that says there's $57 million currently budgeted in the budget we'll all vote on here in a month or two. There's $57 million in the fund now. You want to add $20 million to it on top of, and make that sort of mandatory?
Yes, this would be additional.
Okay, so that would take it to roughly 77 million. No, yeah, 77 million. And when that, do you have any understanding as to that 57 million that's in there now? None of that is mandatory, or does that all, some of that does require to be invested in it?
And I'll say, Delegate Buckle, actually my sponsor panel didn't get to testify yet and may
okay.
answer some of these questions. And if not, we can circle back if that's all right with the chair.
Okay, yeah, that's why I was just trying to figure out, where the money would go, and because when I first read the bill, I thought, oh, well, that's great, 20 million for something that's unfunded, and then I looked and said, well, no, they get 57 million a year now. I didn't know if that was something that's a one-time.
It currently is ad hoc through the appropriations process. There isn't a dedicated funding source currently.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions for this
Madam
panel?
Chair, I'm sorry, my
Yes.
panel didn't actually get to testify yet.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No worries.
It's been a long day. I'm sorry.
All right. Thank you again, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Again, Callie Shumitz with the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. There is a housing affordability crisis in Maryland. Nearly one in 3 Marylanders experience unaffordable housing costs. And when families struggle to pay rent and experience housing instability, that can have a broad range of impacts on health, employment, education, and especially affects children. So we think it makes sense to do everything we can to provide the state with tools to address the housing crisis and the ongoing needs of Maryland families. As the delegate explains, House Bill 211 would provide $20 million a year for the rental housing fund, which would be a good start to continue to support Maryland families. The tax reforms included in this bill would also make our tax system more equitable, and we think this is a reasonable way to fund these increased investments in affordable housing. Decoupling from the opportunity zone provisions that were part of the 2017 Trump tax bill ends Maryland's contribution to providing lucrative tax breaks to wealthy investors. And we also think that it is reasonable to remove or reduce these subsidies for mansions or second vacation homes outside of Maryland, as Delegate Polakovich-Carr outlined. Using these fair tax reforms to ensure that everyone has a decent place to live would strengthen our state for years to come by increasing economic security for families and children. So we would ask for a favorable report on House Bill 211. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Miranda Darden-Willems, and I'm the director of the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition, an association for affordable housing developers who build, own, and manage affordable housing properties across Maryland. And I'm here today in support of House Bill 211. We can all agree, and you've heard from my colleagues, there is an urgent need for more affordable housing across the state. So I'm going to skip talking about the data and focus on the $20 million this bill would provide to increase the DHCD Rental Housing Fund. This fund is used to provide low-interest loans to developers and gives them the last piece of financing that they need to make these complex projects work. In turn, the developers agree to income and rent restrictions that are in place at the property for 40 years. This is the only way that affordable housing is built by the private sector, and these state funds are a key piece of the financing, which has become even more important as rising inflation, interest rate increases, and the cost of building materials continue to drive up the cost of development. This year's proposed capital budget includes $100 million less than last year's budget for rental housing loan programs and is the lowest budget for DHCD in the last 4 years. Additional funds are greatly needed as there are 90 projects under review at the department right now, and they can't move forward until they receive more funding. So I urge you to use the tax savings proposed by this bill to invest in more affordable rental housing for Marylanders who need a safe, stable place to live, and vote favorable on House Bill 211. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the two witnesses on the panel? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 211. Calling House Bill 337, Delegate Plakovich-Carr again. And Ms. Schumans, you can stay. Maddie Long, if she is here. Oh, no, there was one unfavorable. I'm sorry. Is Mr. Enton here? I didn't see him, which is why I think I didn't. Okay, I will call Bob Enton, and he is not here. So that does conclude the testimony on that bill. So, Delegate Plakovich-Carr, House Bill 337, and you have one person that's virtual. So we'll do the three of you and then switch to the virtual.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The legislation before you would ensure that millionaires, billionaires, and wealthy corporations pay what they truly owe in taxes. As this committee has heard me say before, the wealthiest 1% of Marylanders pay a smaller share of their income on state and local taxes, pay the smallest share, excuse me, and it's simply unfair that the wealthy few have a smaller tax burden than any of the rest of us. Moreover, only 3% of our state's revenues come from corporate income taxes, making it one of the smallest sources of funding in our state. The Investing in Marylanders Act of 2023 will generate approximately $350 million a year by closing several corporate tax loopholes and ending the preferential tax treatment of capital gains. These funds are much needed. For instance, starting in fiscal year 2027, the blueprint for Maryland's future fund will start running a deficit. And the funds generated by this bill could be used to shore up funding for public education or any other number of public services. So the legislation closes some highly egregious tax loopholes. It's simply indefensible that we are giving tax breaks to companies for the offshoring of profits and jobs to other countries. Because of a federal tax deduction that Maryland is tied to, we give better tax treatment to dividends from foreign companies than dividends from domestic companies. 8 other states plus DC have already closed this loophole, and 14 additional states have simply never had the loophole. It's indefensible that we allow corporate tax avoidance through the shifting of profits to Delaware subsidiary companies. This loophole allows companies to avoid Maryland taxes by parking trademarks and other intellectual property in an out-of-state subsidiary and then claiming a deduction for the expense of using their own intellectual property. Our state's 2004 law that attempted to close this loophole is one of the weakest in the nation. We should follow the Multi-State Tax Commission's model legislation, which many other states have adopted. It's also indefensible that certain real estate investments are effectively tax exempt in Maryland. As many as 80% of all U.S. real estate investment trusts, or REITs, are formed in our state, yet income produced by REITs is escaping our state income taxes because we don't tax REITs like other corporations. Meanwhile, we're bearing actual costs for providing services to these properties that are located in our state, including police, fire, EMS, road maintenance, and public transit service. We need to decouple from this federal tax loophole. And lastly, it's indefensible that we as a state treat income earned passively from wealth the same as income earned from work. It's an insult to working people to claim that the wages people earn through the efforts of their minds and the work of their hands is the same as wealth generating more wealth through capital gains. We need to stop this preferential treatment that disproportionately benefits the wealthy. It's time to make our tax code fairer. We must ensure that the wealthiest Marylanders and companies pay their fair share of taxes so that we can meet our public needs. And I do anticipate at least one amendment on my and to provide what's known as factor relief for the foreign dividends portion of the bill, and I think that negates most of the opposition testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. Once again, Callie Shumitz with the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. And we support House Bill 337 because it takes several important steps to improve our tax code and would potentially generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue by asking wealthy individuals and multinational corporations to pay their fair share. The bill partially offsets the special treatment of income from wealth rather than work that's in the federal tax code and decouples Maryland from several counterproductive provisions of President Trump's 2017 tax law. Again, we think the capital gains piece is particularly important. I know another witness will be speaking on some of the other pieces. As 70% of households with capital gains income in Maryland, 70% of household capital gains income in Maryland went to 1.1% of households with $500,000 or more in income. So again, this going to the very this is a benefit that benefits the very wealthiest people. An effective revenue system is an essential tool to enable Maryland to protect our investments in the foundation of our economy, such as health, education, transportation. Collecting sufficient revenue is especially important as we work to rebuild our hollowed out state agencies and guarantee all students a world-class education. And just as important, a fair tax system is essential to push back on the increasing concentration of wealth and power in a few hands. House Bill 337 would also improve the racial equity of our tax code because it asks more of households whose income primarily comes from wealth rather than work. The wealthiest 10% of white households control nearly 2/3 of all household wealth in the United States. For those reasons, we would ask for a favorable report on House Bill 337. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Delegate Buckle.
Madam Chair, could my last in-person witness testify?
Oh, yeah, I'm just, my day is like virtual, yes. Michael Mazeroff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Michael Mazeroff with the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of HB 337. I'll limit my comments to 3 provisions of the bill that eliminate unjustified corporate tax breaks. The bill would decouple Maryland's corporate tax code from the federal deduction for foreign-derived intangible income. This provision was enacted to incentivize corporations to do research and development in the U.S. rather than abroad. Whatever one thinks of this goal, it isn't appropriate for states, given their balanced budget requirements, to forego vital revenue to further a national economic policy objective. And that's especially true when there's no guarantee the incentivized activity will actually occur in the state giving up the revenue. Realizing this, 22 of the 45 states with corporate income taxes don't allow this deduction. Maryland should follow suit. The bill would also decouple Maryland law from the federal tax break for real estate investment trusts. REITs are largely exempt from the corporate income tax. The federal government taxes the dividend income of the investors instead. The problem is that the vast majority of the owners of REITs investing in Maryland real estate likely live outside the state. That means that unlike the federal government, Maryland isn't picking up on the individual income tax side, but it's giving away on the corporate side. Maryland is providing services such as police and fire protection to this property, but it's receiving little or no income tax from the profits those services are helping to generate. Maryland should tax REITs the same way it taxes any other corporation, which is what the bill would do. Finally, the bill closes some major loopholes in Maryland's related party add-back law by conforming it more closely to a model law the Multi-State Tax Commission developed. Until Maryland sees fit to mandate combined reporting, it's vital that the add-back provision be as watertight as possible, and the proposed changes in HB 337 will go a long way toward achieving this. I thank the committee again and recommend a favorable report.
Thank you. Could you just hang on with us for 1 second? And Ms. Long, I apologize. Go ahead.
It's no problem. My day's been long too. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Maddie Long, and I'm with Strong Schools Maryland, here in support of House Bill 337. Our primary stance on economic matters is that public funds ought to be used in the service of public good, most typically for education. However, as there are many loopholes and tax breaks in Maryland's tax law, the reality has been that public funds have increasingly been leveraged for private benefit, if those funds are even captured by our tax system at all. As a member of the Maryland Fair Funding Coalition, my organization has supported many initiatives to modernize the state's tax code for the benefit of the public. We're urging you not to allow this legislative session to end without fighting to capture the revenue unnecessarily lost to Marylanders each reporting period. If you refer to our written testimony, you can see that we have not been accurately counting Maryland children in poverty. In fact, we've been missing 1 in 9 students across the state experiencing poverty. With these new methods that we now have in place, we are getting a more accurate count, which makes it necessary now more than ever to capture revenue to invest in our students. A favorable vote on this bill positions our state better in the face of the question, how will we fully fund the blueprint for Maryland's future and the world-class schools our students deserve? The Maryland General Assembly, and specifically members of this very committee, worked hard to pass the blueprint, and in its passage made a commitment to ensure a new era of education in our state. House Bill 337 presents an opportunity to help see this commitment through and allow for our students and school communities to see some tangible benefit. For these reasons, we urge a favorable report on House Bill 337. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Delegate Buckle.
Madam Chair, if I read this correctly, Delegate Polakovich-Carr, the 1%, I'm just going to use the word surtax or added tax on capital gains income would apply to every tax bracket. So if you were somebody who was in the middle class tax bracket and you just happened to have sold some stocks, or perhaps you inherited, I don't know, your parents owned a boat, maybe, you know, not a yacht, just a boat, and you sold the boat and took a capital gains on it, you would have to pay 1% in additional tax on that particular income, regardless of your wealth.
Your read is correct. I will note that the bill does carve out a number of exemptions that would not be subject in the case of selling a boat. That is not one of the exemptions proposed in the bill.
I saw there's a thing about a house if it's $1 million, but if you sold the house for more than $1 million and you got capital gains, you still would pay the 1% surtax on the capital gain above the $1 million.
That's right. But I mean, I think the big picture is that capital gains are disproportionately held in the hands of the wealthiest few. The top 1% of Americans get almost half of the income from capital gains. So, I mean, this is something that is disproportionately held by the very richest.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Mazarov, for joining us virtually. And that concludes the testimony on House Bill 337. Mr. Enton, did you want to come up? And I'm going to recall House Bill 211. And this is your opportunity.
Brief.
Okay.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. I was testifying in the Senate. I came running over here for the Maryland Building Industry Association, and I talked to the sponsors' staff about the bill. The builders are opposed to it. I think you should have written testimony from us in your file. We just think it's going to have a very detrimental impact on construction of housing, and while we very much like to, you know, for us, we clearly recognize how important it is for affordable housing in the Maryland market, you know, to be constructed. But we just think this bill will have a negative impact for the reasons set forth in our written testimony. And with all due respect to the sponsor, we know it's well-intentioned. If you look at the fiscal note is pretty significant. And we would urge the committee to give the bill an unfavorable report.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Enton? Okay, thank you very much. That officially concludes the testimony on House Bill 211. Now calling House Bill 237. It has an amazing bill sponsor. And I would like, what'd you say? It's a bipartisan piece of legislation. And I would like to call up Aaron Tomarchio. Hopefully I pronounced that okay. and Carrie Doyle. And while they are approaching, I will be very brief. So, committee, this piece of legislation extends the limited exemption of the state sales and use tax on construction materials and equipment for another 10 years. In 2016, the General Assembly, in an effort to help the former Sparrows Point steel mill compete globally to attract companies and jobs, had extended the sales and use tax exemption, so this would extend it some more. I will just briefly add that the extension is needed to help continue the momentum that has been created and to help provide stability and certainty to the next phase of redevelopment that was announced. And the project will generate over 1,000 new jobs. Many are union jobs, which I know is important to a lot of folks on this committee. And with that, I will turn it over to whoever would like to go first.
Chairwoman, thank you for sponsoring this bill. I'm Aaron Tamarchio. I'm the Executive Vice President of Corporate Affairs for Trade Point Atlantic. And over the last 8 years, I've actually had the privilege of seeing the former Sparrows Point steel mill rise out of the ashes, and in its place, a 21st century global logistics hub that is now home to over 36 world-class tenants and 12,000 employees. A lot of that work was able to happen because this legislature passed this incentive about 6 years ago, which actually helped us compete nationally and globally and compete also against the greenfields that are out there. We all know brownfield development is extremely expensive, especially cleaning up a former steel mill with the commitments we have made to the environmental cleanup over the years. And I'm pleased to tell you that that environmental cleanup progress is progressing extremely well. There is more to be done at Sparrows Point. There's a lot more opportunity. And to talk a little bit about that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Carrie Doyle, who will talk about the next phase of redevelopment of Sparrows Point. And again, we thank this body for having the vision it had 6 years ago to allow us to compete. Not many jurisdictions, not many states can take a former steel mill in the amount of time that we did and that together and turn it around, clean it up, and put jobs back. But there's still more work to be done. Turn it over to my colleague, Carrie Doyle. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron, and good afternoon. It's great to be here again 8 years later to speak about a very important aspect of our redevelopment efforts in the sales and use tax exemption. As Aaron mentioned, this has allowed us to really compete for opportunities that could find different places up and down the East Coast as well as throughout the country that are significant global logistics opportunities. And specifically, what we're focused on with the next phase of our redevelopment efforts, and we've created about 12,000 jobs. We're hoping to get to about 20,000 when we originally set out to be at about 10,000, so far exceeding expectations. But the way we see this playing out is on a couple different avenues. One aspect of our next steps that'll be incredibly consequential is the manufacturing industry related to the offshore wind development. So that's a big part of what we're doing in the next phase of our redevelopment. Monopile manufacturing, cable manufacturing, and tower manufacturing associated with those aspects. And that will create thousands of jobs and great quality jobs, union jobs with the United Steelworkers and the Local 37 operating engineers. In addition to that, we're focused on one of the first private container terminals, truly private container terminals in the country, with the largest global shipping company in the world. And these opportunities are predicated on this in-place incentive and this in-place incentives extending into the construction phase of these redevelopment efforts, which will be for the next half decade to decade. So we have a significant runway and a very long timeline ahead of us to achieve these opportunities. But they're both exciting and going to be very enriching to the community as well as to the local labor force.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes, Delegate Plakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a bill where, the fiscal note is a little amorphous in terms of what the cost is. It does note that for Baltimore County for fiscal year 2021, that there was $102.4 million in sales tax collected from various building and construction-related categories. Of course, you're talking about a much smaller area of Baltimore County. Do you all have any like better estimate in terms of what the cost has been in a typical year over the past 10 years?
Yeah, so it's a little difficult to quantify just because the exemption applies to not only ourselves as builders of the different buildings, but also to our customers. For example, McCormick Spice will construct a $350 million facility in which certain aspects will apply the sales and use tax exemption to, others will not. For example, the labor components of that build out. What I will say is we've had about $1.5 billion of private investment that we've seen on the site. And typically there's a 50-50 breakdown between hard costs and labor costs, much of which, maybe less than 50% of that investment would qualify. So over the last 8 years, I would say that equates to, right around $7 million a year.
Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I went to this brownfield a number of years ago and looked at the stark nature of it and thought about all the people on the east side of the city who weren't working. Can you tell me how many jobs you have created to this point at Trade Point Atlantic?
Sure, there are 12,000 direct jobs there now. We believe there's a lot more out in the community. Every day when we travel around the site, there's delivery trucks from 410 and 301 area codes that we look at. There's about 1,000 jobs there right now of people actually doing the construction work in addition to the 12,000. We believe that we will exceed that initial estimate we had in 2016, which was that 10,000 jobs on site with another 7,000 in the community. And this next phase of redevelopment will pretty much ensure that and make sure that those jobs are manufacturing type jobs and longshoreman jobs to support the port expansion over at Trade Point.
And other than you and a handful of people working for your company, nobody else was working there when you first took control of the property, am I right? Virtually nobody.
Carrie and I were employee 3 and 4.
Right, exactly. So yeah, good on you.
Delegate Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm excited about the number of union jobs that you have been able to create. But can you expound on how many small businesses have been a part of this project? And to the extent of the tax exemption, how would they also benefit from that? Because when we start looking at opportunities, not only in Baltimore County, but throughout the state of Maryland, and utilizing this tax exemption, and you're asking for another 10-year sunset, I'd just like to know how are our small businesses actually benefiting from this and not just the unions?
Sure. There's a number of ways, and the exemption is on construction materials and equipment, so it's a very targeted incentive for the build up and build out. So a lot of the small businesses that are looking to compete for RFPs that we have out there, they're building this into the exemption into their estimates when they provide us estimates. So it puts everybody on an even playing field. We have a great story on a number of fronts with small businesses that we've engaged over the years. One is Strum Contracting, which is an incredible partner with us. It's a small minority-owned business. I don't think they're small anymore. They've actually grown as a result of the maritime work that we put in place there. They were helping do the steel fabrication around our marine terminal. And that's just one example. There's a lot of other companies, whether it's a guy selling Auntie Annie's pretzels to in a truck outside of one of the Amazon or McCormick facilities. It's attracting opportunity for small business to serve the tenants that are there today and the tenants that will be there into the future.
Yeah,
so I hope I was able to answer some of that for you.
No, not really.
Okay.
But I think as we look at this bill in subcommittee, what would be helpful for me is if you could provide me with the number of small minority-owned businesses that are actually benefiting or participating in this redevelopment. That would be helpful.
Absolutely, we do have that.
All right.
Yep.
If you can get that over. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 237. Thank you very much. Now, House Bill 455, which is also mine, and if Mr. William Rickman could come up along with Bobby Sample for the first panel, and while they're coming up, I will begin, and I will ask the committee for a favorable report on House Bill 455. I'm going to let them really talk about the bill, but the bill alters and makes permanent the annual distribution to Ocean Downs Racecourse for operating loss assistance from the purse dedication account. And if you haven't taken a look at the fiscal note, there is a very handy chart that explains where the money from the purse dedication account goes to, particularly new members. When we talk about racing, it's kind of, you got to get used to it. And the bill also authorizes an annual distribution of equal up to $30,000 per live racing day beginning in calendar 2023. And with that, I will turn it over to who would like to go first. Okay.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Bill Rickman. Just to let you know a little bit about me, I own Rickman Construction Company, Rickman Management, and multiple companies involved in biotech and pharma in Montgomery County, so I'm involved in the state. In 2001, I purchased Ocean Downs Racetrack, not far from Ocean City. Ocean Downs is bordered by Turtle Creek and leads to the Isle of Wight Bay, which is right behind Ocean City. That's the bay behind it. It's a beautiful property surrounded by water. Many of you came out during Mako to see the place, and you know for yourself, it's a pretty nice piece of property. In 2017, I sold Ocean Downs to Churchill Downs, as you well know them for the Kentucky Derby. I continue to help them to develop Ocean Downs Racetrack into a destination location for standardbred racing. Today, I'm in support of House Bill 455. For the last 12 years, Ocean Downs has been reimbursed by statute out of the standardbred purse dedication account, it's horseman's money, to augment the racing expenses up to $1.2 million. We expend the money on 40 to 48 days of live racing, and the Maryland Racing Commission audits us, and they only pass for operating losses. This bill will allow us to continue that practice, but convert the $1.2 million to a daily number in the event the standardbred horseman request additional race days. For example, I think you all know last year Rosecroft Raceway was under contract to be sold and developed. Whoa, time went fast. The sale fell through, but this legislation would be able to take additional race days. It's so I hope you can support it. It's a good thing to do.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name's Bobby Sample, and I'm the General Manager at Ocean Downs Racetrack. I'm here today to testify in support of House Bill 455. Ocean Downs is a standardbred racetrack in Worcester County, Maryland. We typically run 40 to 48 live race days each year between Memorial Day and Labor Day, when we have the benefit of 300,000 tourists just 6 miles away in Ocean City. For more information, I've included a quick fact sheet and some pictures in your folders. As Bill Rickman mentioned, the agreement last summer to sell Rosecroft fell through. However, the likely prospect of a future contract to purchase the land suggests that the racetrack could close again, as it did in 2010. The Maryland Standardbred horsemen race all year long between both tracks. In anticipation of Rosecroft's closure, I had lengthy discussions last summer with the Standardbred horsemen as to whether Ocean Downs could extend our meet and add race days. If we were to do so, we would incur more payroll costs for the staff, additional simulcast expenses to allow wagering, as well as all of the other expenses to put on a live race meet. Given that the additional days would be outside the summer tourist season, we anticipate lower attendance and consequently lower wagering on track. This would lead to larger losses that would not be covered under current statute. For the last 12 years, Ocean Downs has applied for and received the maximum loss reimbursement of $1.2 million annually from the standardbred purse dedication account. House Bill 455 allows the minimum 40-day meet and $1.2 million cap to be calculated at $30,000 per live race day, so that in the event that we need to add more race days for the horsemen, we can do so without any delay. The Standardbred Horsemen support this legislation. You have a letter from their president in your folder, and he's also here today to testify. In closing, this change would give Ocean Downs the flexibility to increase the number of live race days in the event that we were the only standardbred racetrack in Maryland and enable the Maryland Horsemen to race more in our state. I appreciate your consideration of this bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? I have a question for Mr. Rickman. Was there anything else you wanted to tell us?
No, I was pretty much there. It just went fast.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. And next, Jonathan Roberts, please.
You want us to stay up here for questions?
No, you were lucky. They didn't have any questions.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the House Ways and Means Committee. My name is Jonathan Roberts. I'm president of the Cloverleaf Standardbred Owners Association. Our organization represents all the trainers, drivers, and owners that race in the state of Maryland. I'm here today to support House Bill 455. Earlier this year, we were informed that Rosecroft could be sold. This would have been absolutely devastating to the standardbred industry in Maryland. We currently race year-round in Maryland, with race days divided up between Ocean Downs and Rosecroft. Losing one of our tracks would have left the standardbred horsemen with just half of the racing opportunities that they have in Maryland. This would force the standardbred horsemen to seek outside racing opportunity outside of the state of Maryland, depriving the state of Maryland of all the economic benefits that come with running a standardbred racehorse operation, affecting a wide net of retailers and service providers from feed shops, farmers, vet service providers, stable employees, blacksmiths, the list goes on, not to mention the ability to offer open space. House Bill 455 represents an opportunity to provide a measure of security to the people that race in the state of Maryland, allowing Ocean Downs the flexibility to increase race days immediately in the event that one of our racetracks closes. Since this process takes time and can only occur during session, passing House Bill 455 now prevents the possibility of only racing half of a year in the future, which would be catastrophic to many of the horsemen, potentially causing households in your district the inability to economically survive. Please consider passing House Bill 455 and helping us preserve standardbred racing and the positive economic benefits and tourism that it provides to the state of Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe I should have asked this earlier, but I think you'll know the answer too. Even though this is an amount, you can't willy-nilly pick as many race days as you want a year. The Maryland Racing Commission manages that and keeps it within reason, don't they?
Absolutely, yes.
It's good for people to know that.
Any race days have to be approved by the Racing Commission in the state of Maryland.
Yes, so, so you can't just freewheel here.
Oh, no.
Good.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 455. Delegate Crosby, come on up. House Bill 195, and then you have two individuals that are virtual that will bring up, Robert Goldberg and Mary Slade.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. This is much less intimidating than my own committee, and it's good to be in front of Ways and Means.
We are way nicer and way kinder.
That is a true statement. It can be the Thunderdome in my committee at times. But for the record, Delegate Brian Crosby, House Bill 1, I'm here to present House Bill 195, Income Tax Subtraction Modification, Retirement Income. And this bill allows certain seniors, permanently disabled Marylanders and spouses of permanently disabled Marylanders to lower their taxable income. Specifically, the bill adds additional types of retirement income to be accounted for in a specific subtraction modifier on the Maryland Form 502R. As the law currently stands, Marylanders who are 65 or older, totally and permanently disabled, or have a spouse that is totally and permanently disabled may qualify for a maximum pension exclusion of $34,300. However, this subtraction modification only applies to pension annuity, or endowment from an employee retirement system, meaning it must be established and maintained by an employer for an employee. Therefore, Marylanders cannot include other types of retirement accounts for this subtraction modification. This bill would allow individual retirement accounts, rollover individual retirement accounts, simplified employee pensions, savings incentive match programs, and Roth individual retirement accounts to be included on the 502R. Thank you for your consideration, and I respectfully request a favorable report. And with your permission, Madam Chair, I guess I'll have the two panel members go and then take questions.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's see if Mr. Goldberg and Mary Slade are in the waiting room. Okay, we can bring them in. Okay, hi, Mr. Goldberg. Unmute yourself, and whenever you're ready, you got to unmute yourself, sir.
Good afternoon, Chairman Atterbury and members of Ways and Means. My name is Robert Goldberg, and I am testifying on behalf of the Maryland Federation of the National Active and Retired Federal Employees Association, NARF. We support legislation that promotes the general welfare of federal annuitants in Maryland with respect to their rights under tax laws and regulations. We have approximately 300,000 federal employees and annuitants living in Maryland. For the benefit of our members, as well as all Maryland seniors, we support HB 195, sponsored by Delegate Crosby. Maryland now allows a pension exclusion for eligible taxpayers, under which one can subtract some of your taxable pension income from your adjusted gross income. While employer-sponsored pensions are eligible for this pension exclusion, employee-sponsored pensions are not. The employer-sponsored exclusion was originally enacted to benefit federal employees who prior to 1984 were covered under the federal retirement system, but were not eligible to receive Social Security. Because Maryland did and does not tax Social Security income, federal employees raised the issue that this was not equitable, as they had to pay taxes on their pensions, but Social Security retirees did not have to do this. The current pension exclusion was enacted to remedy this inequity, but employer-sponsored programs are not yet covered. Thus, HB 195 offers fairness to all Maryland retirees. Maryland cannot afford to lose retirees who have contributed so much and still have much to offer. NARF recommends that Ways and Means give a favorable report to HB 195 based largely on fairness, but also to keep seniors in Maryland and also to attract retirees from other states who will look to Maryland as a state that will treat them fairly. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Goldberg? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Goldberg. Next, we can bring Mary Slade in from the waiting room. Okay, whenever you're ready, Ms. Slade.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mary Slade, and my husband and I were born and raised here in Southern Maryland. We both own businesses. He's an attorney, and I'm a tax accountant here in Maryland. We are raising our children here, and when you cut me, I bleed all day. Can you hear me?
You got a good chuckle out of that, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yes, okay.
Maybe turn, yeah, if you have us streaming live, turn that off.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Okay, we will not retire here. Maryland discriminates against us small business owners. Both my husband and myself offer retirement plans to our employees. As small business owners, a regular 401k plan is too expensive and cost prohibitive for us to maintain, so we use the simple IRA. It is one of the best plans out there for small business owners. It allows me to contribute to my employees' retirement accounts as well as to myself. In Maryland, the simple IRA is listed as one of the types of plans that do not qualify for the pension exclusion, which for 2022 is $34,300. Anything listed as an IRA does not qualify for the pension exclusion. 99.5% of all businesses in Maryland are small businesses, most of whom use a type of IRA to save for retirement. If an employee leaves a company, even if their money is in a 401k, they are often forced to roll their funds into an IRA, thus making them ineligible. According to the Investment Company Institute, 36.7% of all Americans own IRAs. So we're excluding almost a third of the population by not allowing IRAs to qualify for the pension exclusion. In my practice, I see people who are leaving on a daily basis going to states that are more friendly to retired people. Please give small businesses a reason to retire in Maryland.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Slade? Okay, seeing none, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Delegate Crosby. And that concludes the testimony on House Bill 195. Calling Delegate Ebersol. House Bill 217. And would you like Mr. Watson and Ms. Gargiola to come up with you?
No, I don't want them.
Okay.
They're going to be unfavorable on this, so.
Oh, you do, you're right.
Oh, you know, I like them. They can come up with me if they want to, sure.
It's up to you. However you want to roll
The words of
is
Bob
how you
Barker.
can roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Wait a minute. It is former Delegate Bill Frick in the House. And former Ways and Means member? Correct. I did that in judicial.
So have many of us, okay? No windows. All right, thank you, Madam Chair. When we began the process to allow casinos in the state of Maryland, licensing fees were set. They were set for a couple of reasons. One was to collect money, which we like to do from casinos. It's one of the reasons we have actually allowed them into the state, because we think it's good for us and them. But the other was we wanted to collect a large enough fee to be sure that they were viable. And so we collected a whole variety of fees. They went from as low as $2 million for 15 years, up to a high of, well, let's take a look around here and see if we can't get the biggest one, $28 million, okay, in that vicinity. Sounds like a wild number of variation, but actually, if you examine those fees and the number of the machines that the casinos were awarded, there's a great deal of consistency. If you take their number, for example, if we take the $9 million that Hollywood, the first one that was actually licensed, and the 1,500 VLT, or slot machines, video lottery terminals, that they were awarded, and you divide that, you get a really great number. You get exactly $6,000 per machine. And it's true in each case except one, and that's Rocky Gap. Because we were interested in incentivizing them to come, we gave them a few machines for free, okay? But generally, the machines were $6,000 per. Then if you take that cool $6,000 and divide it by the 15 years, what we get is a really nice little number, $400 per machine per year for 15 years. What we didn't put in the law was what we would do when their licenses came to an end. Now, the casinos are a little worried because it actually says in the law they can apply 1 year before. They would like for their business partners to be able to apply earlier so that they can assure their investors that they're going to be around and we're not going to change the whole thing on them very much. And that's great. So this bill would let them start to work on this process as many as 5 years before their license runs out. I will point out that Hollywood is up in 2025. We've been working on this bill for a while, but because there's been a lot of other things going on in gambling in the state, we've been sort of waiting on this one. There's been things about, what is it, sports wagering? I think I heard something about that, and so we've had a couple of things like that. But now we're there. We're getting to 2 years out, and Hollywood's ready to know what's going to happen. This is what I want to happen. We took that $400 and we indexed it, 2% a year. And when we did that, it came out to a little over $500. I haven't done the computation again this year. When I first introduced the bill, it was about $507. I'm guessing it's in the $520, $25 range somewhere if you do that. That's okay. We'll round it down to 500. It's a nice number, just like 400 was a really nice number. And so what I propose is that the casinos be allowed to relicense at the rate of $500 per machine per year. Now, they've been around. They've showed us that they're viable and they're going to be here. They're not going to fold up and go away. And so rather than collect all of that money from them at once, we're going to, if you will, annuitize it. Okay, we're going to say, hey, listen, you don't have to apply for a new license every year, but you have a fee to pay to maintain your license, and that will be that fee. So it would come out to something like it's actually in the fiscal note, and I don't have it written down, but it comes. I bet these they'll know exactly the numbers. It's it's $1 million, $2 million range a year, depending on who you are and how many machines you have. We have added in table games because now we have authorized table games, so they are also that. You're going to hear that they already pay a fee like that. They pay $400 per machine per year. That's apples and oranges. That $400 goes into the problem gambling fund, and that's very important. But it's also important for us to recognize that casinos exist to help us. This money is all dedicated to the Education Trust Fund, blueprint, 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 okay? And we need that money in every way that we can possibly scrape it together. So I will simply say that we would like to set a fee so they know. It has been suggested that we leave it to lottery and gaming to decide this fee. I suggest that adds a measure of variability that this bill will not. This bill will be very clear with the casinos what they're going to have to do. Their investors will be very clear on it. They're probably going to tell you it's a little too much. Why do we do that? Well, their job is to make sure that we charge them as little as possible, and our job is to see if we can charge as much as we can possibly get them to bear. So we're a little loggerheads. They're going to make a few suggestions here. They're nice people, and I don't resent them for what they do, and they don't resent me for what I want to do right here, and we're trying to make sure that it works out. I will only point out that you would be loath to find a business or any other thing where you relicense and you do it for nothing. And right now, the way the law is written, there is no fee whatsoever in there at this particular point. There's no guarantee that the lottery and gaming will actually ask for a fee in this case. I think it would be good for us to set it into law, and I ask your favorable report on this bill.
Thank you. Ms. Gargiola, would you like to go next? Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, the new Madam Vice Chair, and the members of the committee. There are a lot of new faces here that I don't know. My name is Kerry Watson. I'm Regional Vice President for Government Affairs for MGM Resorts International, here in support of Delegate Ebersol's bill, but with an amendment. Yeah, as part of MGM National Harbor, as you probably know, we were the last casino operational in the state of Maryland. So this bill impacts us not until 2031. Actually, so we have some time, but we are here in support of our industry partners and the state to make sure that our industry partners even have an opportunity to do what they need to do to make sure that they're operational in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. It's important for the industry. It's very important for the state as well, but I want to provide you some very important data. According to American Gaming Association's 2022 report, only Nevada, Pennsylvania, and New York collected more gaming tax than the state of Maryland. I think that's remarkable and something probably the state should be pretty proud about. None of these states, however, have a tax rate as high as ours at MGM National Harbor, which is 56% on VLTs, which is 56 cents per dollar on every dollar we make on VLTs, and 20% just like every other casino in the state for table games. Virginia, just across the river, has a graduated tax rate of 18% on the first 200 million, 23% between 200 million and 400 million, and 30% for 400 million and above, which is significantly, obviously, lower than what we pay at MGM National Harbor. But with all of this, we were proud to announce early last year in 2022 that we surpassed the $1 billion mark in terms of money to the Education Trust Fund. I'm running out of time, so I will add that as he mentioned, we do pay a very similar type of tax every single year. That runs us about $1.3, $1.4 million per year, and this would be a duplication of that tax. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm Hannah Gargiola with Compass Advocacy, here today on behalf of Live Casino, located in Anne Arundel County. Like MGM, we are favorable with amendment. We believe that the process and legal standard for the license renewal does need to be clarified. However, we oppose the renewal fee that is equivalent to the fee that they charge for the original licenses. Back then, this body decided to raise the fees slightly higher than normal because they wanted to make sure that the players in this highly regulated industry were, well-established businesses. And this fee looks to add over $5 billion a year in taxes to casino operators, and it is effectively a new tax. Carrie mentioned the tax rate of other states. Well, our neighboring states, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Virginia all had an original fee like Maryland, but they have no renewal fee for the relicensure other than just basically a cost of an investigation. So as stated, the casino industry has provided almost $5 billion to the Education Trust Fund. Live has invested about $500 million into their casino since they opened, which continues to benefit the Education Trust Fund. And during the pandemic, Live hosted several vaccine clinics. They're among the top 5 philanthropic contributors to the state. So really trying to be a good corporate partner, and we look forward to working with the sponsor of the bill on an amendment.
Thank you. Questions for the panel? Delegate Barnes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Eversole, you got both parties to agree to an increase. I love it.
I'm a big healer. Okay, we hold hands.
You're a big deal.
They squeeze my hand pretty tight though when I'm holding it,
Hey, Carrie, let me just ask, I just had a couple of questions. Because I do look at the tax rate from Maryland and Virginia. I think there's a huge discrepancy. But there do I say that MGM has done well here in the state of Maryland, along with Maryland Live. I think the citizens of Maryland has made you guys in a great posture. Roughly, what are you all doing on a monthly basis, revenue-wise?
Okay, well, first of all, yeah, we agree. Let me back up a bit.
How much are you all doing monthly?
In terms of revenue, not profit.
Correct.
Revenue, it's roughly around 60 to 65 million a month, excuse me.
60 million a month. And
but that is before
that's
tax.
all I asked. Thank
Gotcha.
you. And how much are you guys doing at Maryland Live every month?
I'll find out. I don't have that exact number.
I think you guys are right behind them. So you guys are doing roughly around 50-something million per month. So when you start looking at the tax rate differences, I think you guys are in a good position. And MGM has contributed to your success story, $1 billion to the Maryland Trust Fund. So I think you guys are in a good position, even with this increase in the renewal license fee. My question to you, Carrie, is I know you said you were favorable with the amendment. Did you have your amendment, or what is your amendment?
Yes, our amendment, thank you for asking that too, because I ran out of time, couldn't mention it. So we believe that in 2012, when the law was passed, there was intentionality with the legislature to allow the lottery to make a determination about the payment of that renewal fee, just like every other renewal fee that's part of licensing in the through the MLGCA. Our recommendation is that we continue to allow the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency to determine what a reasonable tax rate might be for each and every opportunity as we go forward.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other?
You should, if I may, Madam Chair.
One more question here from Delegate Patterson.
Sure.
Thank you very much. That was part one of the question, but the other is the amendment offered by the other reporter or advocate, and that is Ms. Mary Hannah.
Yeah, I think if you're asking.
I'm asking if they're similar in nature.
They're the same, yes. Same amendment. I think it should be in your written testimony.
It's not.
Okay.
Thank you.
You can check in the fiscal note and see that the amounts would be even, and we actually index it to cost of living, and we can argue that out, but the highest one would be Live, which would pay about $2.3 million a year. I think that's the highest one I see here. I don't know if I see MGM, but they are, in answer to your question about how they sort of compare to the amount of money, that's what it would be. That's in 2032. Total of $5.9 million a year.
Okay, are there any other questions for Delegate Eversole or Witnesses? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 217. Delegate Ebersol, House Bill 257. And who would you like to bring up? There's several people listed in favor. Craig Romack, Sushant, and Aaron.
I welcome them all.
Okay. And then you have two folks that are unfavorable.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I make just an announcement for the committee? I don't know when, but the clerk's office will be by. If you have a blue back, you can hand it to them so you don't have to walk across the street. So if you have something to turn in, get it ready. I'm sorry, Delegate Ebersol, go ahead.
Sorry. I'm sorry as well, Madam Chair. So this is a little lower level, but it's still gambling. We're not talking about the size of money we were talking before. There are, if you're not aware of it, 6 bingo parlors in the state of Maryland. 3 are in Calvert County, and 3 are in Anne Arundel County. They don't just play bingo there, but they do. I've been to 1 or 2, and they actually do have bingo going on. But there's a couple other things. One of them is something called a pull tab machine. That doesn't matter to you unless you really want to drill down. It essentially looks like a slot machine or a VLT, and people who are playing it feel it operates in a similar manner and has a similar fairness. Okay, what we're talking about here is trying to allow the bingo parlors to up their number of machines. It was originally motivated by the fact that 2 of the bingo parlors were in our A list, if you will, for receiving video lottery, sports wagering terminals, and the other 4, because of their size, were kept out until the second round, if you will. And there was interest in kind of compensating by letting them have a few more machines. And so you can also find this in the fiscal note. The increases, the largest increase in the machines would be from 100 to 150. The smallest would be from 87 to 100, 13 machines. And so we're trying to kind of level things out between all the bingo parlors so they have a kind of an equal shot. By the way, it's important to note that the bingo parlors that didn't get sports wagering terminals can now apply and can get them. They're just a little behind the game. And so this is all just a kind of a balance. Now, it's my understanding that we have these kind of 2 factions, one who had the machines, the sports wagering machines first, and ones that didn't. And we were trying to kind of do an apples and oranges thing, if you let me use the metaphor again, that we were going to give them a few more machines, like lottery video machines, to kind of fix them a little bit or kind of make them whole. And so my understanding is that they have all come to an agreement and they're feeling pretty good about what's there, and that they will make suggestions to the subcommittee. The subcommittee can decide if they deserve it. And that's as far as I'm going to go. I'm going to let some of the folks who are advocates and owners talk to you about it, if that's okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members. Erin Appel on behalf of Delta Bingo, Delta Wasons Bingo, and Abner's Gaming in support of the bill. I'd like to begin by just providing some background on bingo in the state of Maryland. Traditional bingo, as you thought of it, with bingo cards and daubers, has existed for decades. The addition of electronic instant bingo machines, as termed by Maryland Code, began in the early 2000s. The internal mechanisms of these machines makes them different from the slot machines that are operated by the casinos that came along a decade or so later. Legislation was introduced in 2008 to crack down on those machines that were operating in an untaxed and unregulated manner, but to permit those that were operating as good players to continue to operate. The companies that operate under the law today and are included in this bill are those good actors. They are taxed at 35% and regulated both locally and by the state lottery. They have consistently followed the rules. We are talking about jobs and revenue to the state and to 2 localities, Anne Arundel and Calvert counties, and it's not insignificant revenue. This body made the very thoughtful and proactive decision to permit them to continue to operate, and our ask is just that you allow them to stay competitive in light of all the other entertainment options that have come along since that time. First slots, then table games, and now sports betting. Just today, the lottery approved the 8th mobile license for sports betting in the state. And we are simply asking you to allow these 6 longstanding facilities a limited number of new machines so they can maintain jobs and tax revenue by staying relevant and in business. Thank you.
Who would like to go next?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. My name is Craig Romack, Operations Manager of Delta Bingo and Gaming here in Maryland. We have 2 locations, one in Laurel and one in Lothian, both in Anne Arundel County. I'm here today in support of House Bill 257. Bingo in general, as well as electronic bingo, have a long history in Maryland. We were here well before sports betting and the casinos and their slot machines and table games. For decades, we've operated within the bounds of the law, fully licensed, taxed, and regulated. At first by the county and now by the state lottery. In fact, many years ago, before my time, we actually went to the county and asked to work together to create a regulatory framework for us to operate. We've been working with them as partners ever since. To be clear, the gaming tax on every revenue dollar is a total of 35%, 25 to the state and 10 to the county, the Anne Arundel County. This is significant from a taxpayer's tax perspective. We're not seeking to blow up our industry. We're a tiny speck in comparison to large casinos. Last month, they generated more than $167 million in revenue, and that's just 1 month of January. So we're not taking away from them. We're simply asking, excuse me, we're simply asking you to help us stay competitive and therefore in business, while at the same time increasing the state and local revenue. We have long-serving employees, Maryland residents, many of whom have been with us for decades. Our operations don't take away business from the casinos. We serve a very different clientele. The fact that casinos collectively left 7,500 machines on the table, no pun intended, they've been authorized by this body to operate speaks directly to that fact. They've left 7,500 machines on the table. We're simply asking for 50 instant bingo machines. I'm running out of time, sorry. I'm just stating in closing, of course, this bill is about jobs and tax revenue. Table games, casinos, all jobs and tax revenue.
Thank you.
We're just trying to do the same thing.
Thank you.
Jobs and tax revenue. Thanks.
And
Thank you for your time.
I appreciated the pun. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Sushant Sid here on behalf of Delta, Wasons, Atlantic Bingo, and Abner's Bingo in Calvert County. I just want to underscore a couple of points here. This is about leveling the playing field. Time and time again over the last several years, the casino industry has come to this committee, come to the legislature, to seek changes to how we conduct gaming in this state. And because of their partnership with the state, the committee has chosen to let them have allowances in terms of modeling so that we have a thriving casino industry in the state. Well, again, as Craig and Aaron, Ms. Appel stated earlier, bingo is a partner with the state of Maryland. We generate considerable amount of revenue not only for the state, but also for the local jurisdictions, particularly Anne Arundel and Calvert County. This bill just provides a leveling of the playing field. The casino industry, we're never going to be competitors with them. I mean, we're talking about $60 million a month. Our guys don't do that. We don't even come close. I think from a revenue standpoint to Anne Arundel County, we contribute about $3.5 million in taxes, and that's on a 10% tax rate. Not insignificant, but it's still nowhere near the level of revenue that the casino industry generates. I think as you know, spoken or stated earlier, we are highly regulated by the lottery, same commission that oversees the casino industry. We are good actors. We don't make mistakes. You know, we play by the rules. And so just with that, I think that when we're talking about the number of machines, the casino industry is authorized to operate 16,500 machines. They do not operate 7,500 machines because the tax rate's too high. They'd rather have table games that are taxed at 20%. We are just asking for a pittance. I mean, I think the total number of machines we're asking for, 150 plus. So let's say under 200 machines. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Delegate Barnes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a couple of questions because, listen, this fight, debate, conversation has been going on now for a couple of years. And I think, you know, we have all seen the transformation of our gaming industry here in the state of Maryland. We now know that sports betting is live and doing well in its early phases. Let me just ask, there are 6 bingo halls in the state, is that correct?
That's correct.
And out of those 6, have anyone received a sports betting license? 2. And what about the other 4? And are the other 4 intended to apply for a sports betting license, or they're not going to apply for one?
I think they're looking at the marketplace right now.
All right.
They have to make a business decision based upon how other, businesses perform in that setting.
So I'm looking at what your words are. We need to make sure that we're leveling the playing field. And to your also point, you would never level the playing field simply because of the differences in revenue. And I'm looking at, Aaron, if you can tell me, what is the limited number of machines that you guys are asking for to maximize the new machines to come into the bingo hall?
If we're under the bill, it would be in Anne Arundel County, 50 per hall, but a lot less in Calvert because they have a larger number there existing.
So do we know what the number of new machines are for the 6 bingo halls?
A total?
No, where you said Anne Arundel was how many, 50?
Anne Arundel is 50 each.
What about the other
Correct.
4?
13, 15, and 18,
That's
I
correct.
believe.
Yes. So it's under
And
200
17.
machines total statewide.
Okay. And then I had another question. Because I think, Craig, you had said that you want to make sure that, once again, using you guys' word of leveling the playing field, and it's about creating jobs. How long have the bingo halls been here in the state of Maryland? Because you had stated that you're just trying to stay in business. So how long have you all been in business in the state of Maryland?
We've been in business for over 20 years.
So
But
over
the bingo
20
industry itself is 60 plus.
Okay. So for over 20 years, you're still fighting to stay in business.
Yes. Yeah. The biggest hit was when the casinos were rolled out. Of course, that was the biggest hit. But we've kind of tried to claw back a little and do what we can to minimize the hurt.
And let me just say, I want to go back to sports betting. When we put the bill out for sports betting, the bill was intended to ensure that we had minority participation in it. And I'm not sure where you guys are in the bingo halls as far as your ownership structure or minority participation. Because when I look at leveling the playing field, and you guys are now asking for an increase in machines, I guess to increase your revenue streams, is how do we level that playing field to also ensure that minorities are participating in this generational wealth building that you guys are creating. And now understanding that there are 2 bingo halls that have licenses and 4 that do not, but still may apply for a license based on their business model or needs. Am I understanding that correct?
They have the ability to do so, just like any other entity that would choose to do so, but certainly they don't have a leg up. And I don't think anybody has made a decision to at this time.
And Delegate Barnes, just I think to your overall question, this is about viability. And so as the casino industry has come back time and time again to make small changes in laws to make their business more successful and equally, give the state additional revenue because they're successful, this committee, the legislature has said bingo is legal. And so all we're asking for is a tool or tools to make our businesses more viable, paying taxes, hiring people, and reinvesting in our community. It's a very small, minute in comparison to what the casino industry already offers.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Calling up Carrie Watson and Hannah Gargiola. I figured that would be the case.
All right. Once again, good afternoon. Kerry Watson, Regional Vice President of Government Affairs for MGM Resorts International, here in opposition of House Bill 257. I don't know how many of you have ever visited some of these bingo halls, but I went last year because after this bill came up, and I actually took my wife and we walked in because I had no idea what it looked like. And I was actually quite impressed. You walk in, there are a number of machines that look exactly like slot machines, at least to most people, look exactly like a slot machine. You know, in 2008, when the bill was passed, the referendum was passed by Marylanders to allow for gaming, there was an understanding of what you were going to get. Obviously, when you hear bingo halls, you don't think about slot machines. I'm sure that if you were to walk in there and put your money in the machine, it would look, sound, smell, act like a slot machine. But I think the important differentiator, or there's a number of important differentiators, but the important differentiator between what you see at your casinos and what you see at the bingo halls is our dedication to responsible gaming. Delegate Ebersol mentioned earlier about the amount of money that we send to the state to support responsible gaming is extraordinary, really. And you think about the security when you walk into a casino. You have to walk by a security guard, the amount of surveillance that we invest, the training that every single employee is licensed has to go through to ensure that individuals who are under 21 or who are on the voluntary exclusion list are not allowed to gamble. MGM National Harbor last year in 2022 removed 161 individuals who were on the voluntary exclusion list. That is one of the things that we're responsible to do by the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency, who is on our floor 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. With that, I would ask for an unfavorable report.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and members of Ways and Means. Hannah Garagiola with Compass here today on behalf of Live Casino. Live opposes House Bill 257. Carrie brought up a really good point about the security measures that the casinos go through for responsible gaming. I think the other thing, you have a written testimony, it's pretty thorough, but the other thing I would like to just point out is that our money, the funds that come to the casino, goes right to the Education Trust Fund. So you really wouldn't want to take money away from that by direct competition with these bingo halls. Like Carrie said, they play exactly like slot machines. I don't think I could tell a difference between a bingo machine and a slot machine because they are built to look exactly like slot machines. So we're asking for an unfavorable report on House Bill 257.
Thank you. Questions? Delegate Ebersol.
Just to get a sense of scale, how many VLT machines do you each have in your facilities?
Actually, don't recall, but it's a significant number. You probably have it in front of you.
I do have it in front of me. It's about 3,800 at Live and about 2,100 at MGM. Does that sound about right?
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Under this bill, the total number of new machines would be about 1,000. So it's really just information, so we get a sense of scale.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you both very much. And that concludes the testimony on House Bill 257 and rounding out our day, Delegate Wells. And I'm going to let you bring up, there's a lot of folks in favor, so whoever you would like to come up as part of your first panel. So whenever you're ready, Delegate Wells, and make sure everyone, please, just when you speak into the microphone clearly and make sure we know your name. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of Ways and Means Committee. For the record, my name is Delegate Melissa Wells. I'm here today for HB 270. HB 270 aims to increase the Maryland Film Fund to $25 million from its current $12 million in fiscal 2024 and $50 million beginning in fiscal 2025. In addition, I have amendments for this legislation that have been emailed to you that include the additions of reality television, game shows, and talk shows. Maryland has the ability to become a thriving film and television industry. We are America in miniature. Every year, we are losing our talent from our amazing film schools to states that have more work because of their funds, and we are losing out on projects because we simply do not have the funds to entice these projects to film across our state. With a nearly $4 return on every $1 we spend on this program, I am hopeful that we can take this year and this legislation to expand our work in this industry. I'm happy to have a number of people here to testify on the positive impact our film program has on small business, the industry, and our local communities. It is with this that I would request a favorable report on HB 270. Thank you. I'll pass it along to my panel.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair and Vice Chair and members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Debbie Dorsey. I am here today on behalf of the Maryland Film Industry Coalition. We're an alliance of labor and business leaders, educational institutions, and individuals who all work together to improve the business conditions for the film industry in Maryland. And we are here in support of House Bill 270. And thank Delegate Wells for introducing this bill again. Thank you very much. This bill will create more jobs for crew, opportunities for students, more jobs for actors and talent, as well as cash flow to diverse businesses of all sizes throughout the state. In 2022, we had a Paramount series, a new one called Lioness, and it filmed in 9 counties throughout the state, from Washington County, the mountains, to the Queen Anne's County, the Chesapeake Bay, and then from the north, Hartford County down to Prince George's County. This show really did show off what all Maryland has to offer, which is quite a lot. The program works. According to the Maryland Department of Commerce, from 2011 to 2022, the projected economic impact of the film industry in Maryland is well over $1.2 billion. And we could do so much more. In Georgia, just this past year, they reported $4.4 billion in economic impact. So that just goes to show, with an enhanced program, what we can do here. It's just a shame because several times a month, the Baltimore Film Office and the Maryland Film Office receives calls from producers and studio executives about bringing projects here. And as soon as our $12 million program opens, we have to close it again because we're tapped out. So I'm just here to thank you all for the continued work for this and to give HB 270 a favorable report. Thank you.
Hello, Chair Atterbury and Committee. My name is Keith Mellinger. I'm the Director of the Screenwriting and Animation Program at Morgan State University. I'm here to speak on behalf of higher ed. We had a banner year in 21 and 22. We had students who worked on Lioness, students and alumni. Lioness, Lady in the Lake, We Own the City, The Spook Who Sat by the Door, and Safe Space. I cannot tell you how gratifying it was to do a director's shadow on Lady in the Lake and to find alum working as crew on the production when we took students to the set. This is so important for our local students, and we have hundreds of them, if not 1,000 or more, who are in graduate programs and undergraduate programs at private and public institutions. The opportunity to work in your own backyard or to have the eye in to how the collaborative movie industry works is invaluable. It also has collateral benefit to our film arts outreach to young people because movies in the region draw attention. It gives us a chance to be on set, to discover the craft. It takes an army of people to put together a film. And it also feeds into independent filmmaking, the small gems that we know our local filmmakers are going to make and tell new stories about Baltimore that are going to be really important to tell. I support HB 270. It's important to all of our higher education institutions, both undergraduate and graduate. I will say that it's especially important to Morgan State University because it coincides with a robust diversity incentive that has never existed to this extent in industry. Thank you very much.
Greetings,
Madam Chair and the committee. My name is Tawanda Underdew. I'm a full-time professional actor and voiceover artist for the last 20 years. I was born, raised, and am living in Baltimore. I'm a proud first-generation college graduate of Towson University, and I've grown up here, and I make my living in the state of Maryland. I serve as the SAG-AFTRA National Board Member for the Washington Mid-Atlantic, representing over 5,000 union actors, broadcasters, and performing artists. We have provided testimony, and you can read it, but I'm going to highlight a few points. The Washington Mid-Atlantic local of SAG-AFTRA is the third largest local in the nation outside of New York and LA, but we do not have the third largest tax incentive program. Tax incentives have changed the way film and television production is done in this country. Projects go where the tax incentives are, therefore the performers go there as well. I want to work here and live here, but the current tax incentive program does not support multiple projects at a time. So when my agent calls me and says, I want you to travel to Atlanta for shows such as The Other Black Girl or Stargirl, and to New York for shows like Wu-Tang and American Saga and Bull, I do go there and I'm excited about it, but I prefer to work here. I'm apprehensive because of all of the physical and emotional traveling that I would have to do to work in these locations. I have to leave family and friends behind. I'm worrying about travel safety and lodging. I end up working in other places like Pennsylvania and Virginia and putting money into their economies instead of right here. We need a stable and consistent tax incentive program. Bring it here in this state. This bill is a rebate for productions. It results in hiring local performers and crew members, buying local from countless small business owners, putting millions of dollars in the economy here, empowering tens of thousands of tax-paying creatives in front of and behind the camera, and allows them to make a living wage, put food on their table, give access to health care, retirement benefits, and pension, therefore reducing the impact on the state's programs. Let our state be a template for locals across the nation. As a member leader,
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up.
Oh, thank you. As a member leader, thank you so much. I support HB 270 and hope you would too. Thank you so much. Thank you. My passion. Thank you.
Never follow an actor. My name is David O'Farrell. I'm the business agent for the Mid-Atlantic Studio Mechanics and Broadcast Technicians. I'm representing about 600 technicians that make their living working on motion picture and television production here in Maryland. The main question is, why is this a good investment? This is an industry that creates product that fulfills a universal need, entertainment. It creates good jobs and often better than the state average earnings for an individual, as well as health and retirement benefits. These numbers aren't final, I'm about to give you, but as an example, Lady in the Lake was about $12 million in wages to the crew. I'm not talking about the actors or anyone else. And about $3 million in benefits, which include health and retirement, as well as Lioness was about $15 million in wages and about $5 million in benefits. And at one point had about 350 crew working. Lioness worked all over the state, has been mentioned. We've had projects in other counties as well, Hartford, Cecil, Talbot, Worcester. This is not a Baltimore-centric industry. We support adding language for additional incentives for those working in underutilized areas, as well as adding language about the hiring, an additional amount for the hiring of Maryland residents, like many other states are already doing. In the process, we're in the process of working with the major studios and all production companies on DEI initiatives, create more opportunities for those who would normally get the chance to enter into this industry. We're working on increased training, not just for our members, but also making it available to college, community college, and workforce programs. One production can create hundreds of jobs. Multiple productions create more jobs and opportunities. Should we end up in a recession? Oh, really? All right.
Go ahead, you can wrap up.
Well, no, we're recession-proof, we're COVID-proof. We were back within 4 months of the start of the COVID, working with protections in place, return to work protocols. And our crews are highly sought after, as I've mentioned before. I'm going to end with just this. I've been coming here for quite some time, asking and hoping for an increase in the film activity credit. And I'm going to resort to something I believe I've never done before in all my years of testimony. Please, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this panel? Delegate Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Listen, I think this is one of those conversations that we've had for the last several years. And I think it's time that we really try to be helpful. And I have some ideas in which how we can try to come to a point where we can be helpful. Let me just ask, you know, with a $12 million tax credit, how many shows or movies or how do we benefit from that? Or how many productions benefit from a $12 million credit? How many would benefit from a $25 million credit? And obviously the return on investment is the number of people that would be buying local, spending money, so we would earn those tax dollars back essentially. But I'm just trying to understand how far those dollars from a tax credit would actually be beneficial to a production to come to the state of Maryland.
Okay, well, I'll answer. So out of the 12 million we currently have, there's a 10% that gets set aside for Maryland independent filmmakers. So that's 10.8 million for larger productions like The Lioness and Lady in the Lake that we spoke about. And then 1.2 million set aside for the Maryland independents, which we get 5 or more a year all around the state. So with that 10.8, that's one production. So right now, there's a project cap at 10 million. So one project is all we get of the big ones, and then 4 or 5 of the smaller productions. As far as labor goes, I mean, I have an example for We Own the City. We just had in Baltimore a 6-part miniseries, hired 1,874 Marylanders, purchased or rented goods from, this is from the Department of Commerce, 2,210 Maryland businesses, and the economic impact was $95 million. So that's that one project that we were able to bring in that year.
And if I could just ask, what are some of our neighboring states' tax credits that puts us at a disadvantage that they would go to them before they come to Maryland?
Well, I can say Pennsylvania has 70 million, and they're looking to grow that incentive to 100, I think is their legislation this year. Ohio has 40 million, New Jersey has 100 million, going south, North Carolina has 31 million, Georgia is unlimited, we talk about Georgia a lot, Massachusetts is unlimited, Illinois. Dave can mention, Virginia is looking to increase to 50.
Close to 50 with the projects they're looking at. I can also talk about, there's 40 states and territories that have programs, and the average is $62.5 million per program. Some are lower, of course, some are much, much higher. But we are in competition with all of those states for this work.
All right, my last thing, if we were able to get the increase, I just ask that the next film is Judge and Jury with my chair starring in it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Judge and Jury. I will totally be ready for my close-up. We have Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, as Delegate Barnes said, we've had this bill for a lot of years. I've always been a little skeptical of it simply just because it's in excess of things we do for like cybersecurity, biotechnology. But I've realized, I think over the years, it's different. My fundamental concern is that the benefits have tended to accrue in a handful of jurisdictions. Baltimore City is a very unique place to set a tableau for a television show. There are other jurisdictions that have had that. Would you be willing to entertain some ways to move around the margins of how the credits are allocated if we get all this additional money in the credit field to help incentivize film production facilities going into other economically disadvantaged areas of the state that maybe haven't had this? I know Prince George's County doesn't seem to have had a lot of the projects there. my area of Western Maryland. I do appreciate Lioness, did some filming in Washington County. I think, I've had these discussions offline. We had a wonderful opportunity to get a Greg Garcia manned project in Frostburg, Maryland, because Greg Garcia is a graduate of Frostburg State University. He writes about it. He has multiple television shows that he's been the executive. We couldn't do it because the credit was pretty much all eaten up with projects that were going to Baltimore City, and also because there were some economic considerations. Would that be something that you think we could work on to try to help steer? If we're going to add all this money to the credit, we can find ways to incentivize projects to make it our truly statewide economic opportunity?
Absolutely. I think they'll also, and I'll let my panel chime in, I think there's a couple of things. So I was looking at Mr. Mellinger over his shoulder. He had a list of all the productions, and it does not just include Baltimore City in terms of where we've been. I think, though, there's probably a bit of the, Deb could probably speak more to this, but I think part of it is the fact that the fund is so small, and it's on a first-come, first-served basis. So I think that also, obviously, within being intentional, but also the fact that we need to increase the amount of money, because then we can spread the wealth more broadly across the state, right? So I think that we have to, we can do both, but we can't do what you're saying if we don't have.
If we don't increase the credit. And I think that in that case, the case I was explaining, we were basically told, hey, we've committed all of the credit for the next 18-month period to, I believe it was, We Own This City, and that's it. And so it's sort of like, well, that's a one-time production. It's going to be on 6 episodes, 8 episodes, whatever it was, and then it goes away. It's very focused on one part of the state. So I'm very interested in working with the sponsor and others if we move it through the subcommittee to find ways to broaden the application of the credit if we can find ways to increase the value of the credit. Thank you.
And as I mentioned in my testimony, and I prefer the term underutilized areas. But anyway, and as when we spoke before and shared a possible amendment where we would do an additional percentage allowable to productions for shooting in those areas over and above even the 10 million. So if we were able to add a small percentage, I think we've talked about 5%, but that's certainly something for the committee to go over and look at economically. In addition to, as an added incentive, that would drive more of that work into those areas, being able to do that over and above. And you're also going to hear some other testimony about the opportunities that arose out of Lioness shooting in those other areas.
And a lot of states offer, they call it a bump, so a 5% bump to film in other areas, so it's not uncommon.
Delegate Wu, and then we do have some other folks that would like to testify in support of this legislation. Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe this is a great initiative, and the filming industry definitely help both the economy and the culture and many aspects for the local community. And Maryland has a very rich history and very close to the capital, the political center, and have very diverse economy as well. I believe this program can definitely really help us to really lift off. So beyond the financial support, right, do we have really other means really providing incentive would help attract more production coming to Maryland?
I think that one of our natural incentives or assets is that Maryland is American miniature, and so I think that we just have the topography, the way our state is. You have ocean, you have mountain air. Like, we're just a very attractive area, and then you have urban areas, not just Baltimore City, but even other small little cities like Ellicott City. If you think about one where they're able to utilize that to film. And you could turn it into another location. You would never know that it was. We know shows like House of Cards, they use Baltimore City, and I think other parts of the state as well to emulate Washington, D.C. So I think that's an asset. I think the other piece is that we have so many different programs here. We just heard from SAG-AFTRA in terms of being the third largest. So in terms of actors, actresses in Maryland, and this, they're coming from here. We have the stage hands and all those folks behind the scenes. Then we also have the pipeline of training programs, Morgan State, Johns Hopkins, Micah. Sure, I'm forgetting Stevenson. Like, I don't want to give all the shout outs, and everyone says Delegate Wells forgot us. But we have a lot of programs, and so I think that if you think about the economy around that in terms of the pipeline, and then also how attractive it is to film here because of how beautiful Maryland is. Those are our other natural assets. We just need more money.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call up the next 5 folks listed on my list. Aaron Skalka, John Krumpetich, I'm sorry if I am butchering your name, David Nip, Nicole Powell, John Pavaza.
One order? Sure, I guess.
And then
Aaron,
is-
I'm Aaron Skalka.
One second, is Chris
sorry.
Dews here? I did not see him. He was, okay. So then this is the last group of people. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm Aaron Skalka, and I'm here obviously in support of this bill. And I'm actually here as 3 separate people. I'm here as a crew member. I've worked in the film and television business for 28 years. And I'm here as a business owner. I own a business that provides goods and services to the film and television industry that is located here in Maryland. And I'm here as a Marylander who directly benefits from the economic impact of this industry. I was here several years ago when we talked about this the first time, and it went through. You guys were very generous in your support, and Governor passed it, and a miracle happened. I spent the last 2 years working at home, which is the only 2 years in 28 that I've ever worked at home. And it works. I've stayed here. The only people that are disappointed in that are maybe my wife, I don't know. But certainly Delta Airlines, who I'm not flying back and forth to Atlanta as much. But the reality is that as a crew member, working here and seeing the direct impact of a movie like We Own This City or Lioness or Lady in the Lake, all 3 of which I worked on, and seeing what it does in those communities, seeing the benefits to places like Morgan State, where as a seasoned crew member, I can take a younger person in and teach them my craft, but also as a business owner and allowing us to expand our business here in Maryland, which results in income tax paid to the state, the hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of fees we pay to the MVA every year to keep a fleet of vehicles registered here, all of those things. But mostly as a Marylander who directly benefits from the tax revenue that is generated by our industry. So I thank you all for what you have done. I ask you to do a bit more. There's a little saying that they can do it in Georgia, we can do it better in Maryland. So I wish you good luck.
Thank you. I mean, I've literally never heard that saying, but I will.
Madam Chair, House Ways and Means Committee, my name is John Krumpetich, and I am the owner of Fort Ritchie, which was the mountain scene and also the base scene for Lioness. There was a lot of intrepidation of our little local community from the mountains. We've never had anything like this, and there were folks that weren't sure how this was going to go. With 100% certainty, we would welcome any production with open arms again. It was a tremendous impact on every local business in the area. There wasn't one local business that didn't come up afterwards asking me, when is the next movie? Because they bought out all the propane tanks from our local supplier. They just completely swarmed every local business that had been struggling through COVID and all sorts of other challenges. Our area of the state, as one of the delegates mentioned earlier, is the mountains of the state. You know, and it's a remarkable place and a very large place where these companies are able to film and do some phenomenal production value type things. One funny story I can tell you very quickly is some of the folks that were from LA, it was an October day and it was very cold, and one of them said, "Is it going to snow today?" And I said, "Probably." So it's just, we have such a unique opportunity and such a unique place that we're able to house these large scale film options. We were the only spot that Linus was able to film not only set 1, but also set 2. Because we just have that much space. So when we were talking about disadvantaged communities, I mean, we are certainly a low-income community that is in the midst of a revitalization with what we're doing at Fort Ritchie. We have seen Maryland be wonderful partners of ours, and this is just another way that we can partner with the state to continue to drive economic commerce, to drive economic activity and commerce in Western Maryland. So we really hope that you support this bill because it is advantageous for our part of the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
Hi, thank you. My name is David Knipp, and I'm part of the development team at Brewers Hill in southeast Baltimore. And we've taken the old National Brewery and Gunther Brewery and converted it into a mixed-use community. For the last couple of years, we've been lucky enough to have several of the production companies mentioned lease space in our office buildings. And what's important to point out is the office building in general is pretty stagnant right now. An existing company will move to a new location, so there's really no positive absorption. When the production companies come and they take big blocks of space, and they take it immediately. From my perspective, that means we've got to hire local contractors to paint, to prepare the space. We've got to hire local carpet companies, et cetera, to get everything ready. Additionally, there's the internet service providers we have to bring in, all the office equipment and so forth. If I take a step back from my own selfish reasons of the office world and look at kind of the greater Brewers Hill community, there are a lot of locally educated kids that work on these sets, but they also bring in people from out of town. Typically, the bigger productions will lease anywhere from 50 to 100 apartments in the area while they're actually in production. Much like the propane guys in Western Maryland, our restaurants in the area love it. They always ask when they're coming back. Again, when they're building the actual sets, the local Home Depot is drained of all 2x4s and sheetrock and electrical supplies and so forth. There's rental cars, there's security companies, there's transportation companies. I could go on and on. I just find that the trickle-down effect of having these production companies, far outweighs the tax incentives that are being provided. So I wholly support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Sure. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Nicole Powell, but I go by Nikki Powell. And for the last 2 years, I've been a locations coordinator. On the latest show, I'm actually wrapping up as the Lioness. And then before that, we own the city. I just want to read the statement that I prepared for you today. I am in full support of House Bill 270 that calls for the increase of the film production activity tax credit to $50 million by 2025. I agree with the Maryland Film Industry Coalition and the Baltimore Office of Promotion in the Arts. It is imperative to increase the tax credit to attract more film and television productions to Maryland. I also stand in solidarity with my union brothers and sisters of IATSE Local 487 to share with you how that tax credit directly impacts our lives and careers. I am a Baltimore native. I am a product of Baltimore City Schools. After graduating Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, obtaining my undergraduate degree at the University of Maryland at College Park, I obtained a master's in film and media from Johns Hopkins University in 2019. It has been a tremendous blessing to work on 4 major productions that include The Spook Who Sat by the Door, which was a pilot by FX, a Lee Daniels production. Also, award-winning production of Soledad O'Brien's company, Black and Missing docuseries. You can catch that on Netflix. And then HBO's We Own the City, and lately, Paramount's Lioness. In my role as a locations coordinator, I've been able to hire students from Morgan State, from MICA, from Johns Hopkins, from Towson University. I've been able to hire local companies as well and pay homeowners and neighbors that support the efforts of film production in Maryland. If we do not provide a viable pipeline of film and TV production, other people will leave and go to other states. 4 of my last assistants just moved to Atlanta. So please support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And real quickly, Mr. Dews, if one of you would swap with him, you can come on up. Mr. Favaza.
I'm John Favaza. I work with Manus Canyon and Associates here in Annapolis, and we represent the Motion Picture Association. The MPA is the leading producers and distributors of motion pictures. It's Disney, Netflix, Paramount, Sony, Universal, Warner Brothers, names you're familiar with. We'd like to thank Delegate Wells for once again sponsoring legislation on this topic. Look, you've heard it, competition for film and television production, it's intense. These incentives can and do make a difference. Maryland is well known throughout the industry for its skilled and talented crew on the ground here. Companies know there's going to be, first-rate team to support these productions when they come to Maryland. But look, production costs and financial incentives continue to be a critical factor in this decision-making process. So anything this committee can do to enhance this credit will absolutely result in more productions coming to Maryland. So thank you to the chair and to the committee for your leadership on this issue in the past, and we ask for a favorable report.
Thank you. Mr. Dews.
This is, okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. I'm Christopher Dews. I'm actually testifying on behalf of, myself, and a variety of individuals who have reached out to me regarding this issue from last year and again on this year. For those of you who may not be aware, my background was actually in the performing arts from UMBC, full ride scholarship, just highlighting that. And I've had a lot of experience acting in the film and commercial and media spaces. Now, this bill specifically, when I talked to clients about this and friends and colleagues that are in the industry, they said, hey, look, man, you're a lobbyist. Is there anything you can do to bring tax credits back to film production? And I said, well, I'll give it a shot. But the most important thing was they had highlighted, Chris, you have no idea how many jobs you're going to be able to bring in. Casting directors are going to have more opportunities. Actors are going to have more opportunities. Technicians, lighting, sound, design, grips. And these are individuals that I'm friends with who travel from D.C. to Atlanta to New York to L.A., and the vast majority of them started right here in the state of Maryland, but have mentioned on multiple occasions that ever since, I believe they told me since 2014, there's been a massive drop-off in the amount of work that can be produced here because of this income tax credit. So I'm actually here speaking on behalf of them, not just for myself, and also in my other employment. I was working to advance lower wage workers to higher wage jobs, and one of the things that you have to know is that it's a very, very hard to get work in this industry. And so the more opportunities that do exist, you're going to see a massive boon of individuals in the arts coming to Maryland, sticking to Maryland, and building out their careers in the state of Maryland, which I think we already have a strong arts economy, but it can be even stronger and even better with the passage of this tax credit. For those reasons, I do urge a favorable report.
Thank you. Any questions for anyone that just testified? Okay, thank you very much. And with that, that concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 270. That concludes the Ways and Means bill hearings for today. Committee, we are going to break. It is 4:23 according to my cell phone. We will come back at 4:30, and we will vote. Everyone was emailed a vote list.